Chapter 143. The cold light receded and the blood mist gradually dissipated. The three bandits had turned into a pool of blood on the ground. Looking at Yu Qianqiu, who was standing with his hands behind his back, everyone shuddered. This was clearly a murderous demon. The thick smell of blood left a deep mark in everyone's heart. Fu Qing. Yu Qianqiu called out. The person who was called let out an ah and moved over with trembling legs. His chin trembled as he said, Eldest young master. Yu Qianqiu glanced at him and frowned. He shouted, What are you afraid of? How can you guard the door of my Yu clan with this kind of behavior? Stand properly. Yes, eldest young master. Fu Qing tried his best to suppress his trembling body. Arrange for people to surround this place. Without my permission, none of the Yu clan's relatives are allowed to leave. As he spoke, a sword appeared in Yu Qianqiu's hand and he handed it to him. He said, Hold this well. If anyone dares to barge in, kill them with this sword. Seeing him holding the sword in a daze, Yu Qianqiu shouted again, If anyone dares to barge in, kill them without mercy. If you dare to let even one person go, I will take your head. Do you understand? Understood. Fu Qing hurriedly nodded his head. All the relatives looked at each other in dismay, but no one dared to object. The patriarch and his sons' faces were ashen. Yu Qianqiu faced his father and bowed. He said, Father, please wait a moment. I will go to the Octagon village to bring my brother back. It won't be long before the truth is revealed. Yu Qianggui nodded and said, Go. Come back quickly. Don't let the relatives wait too long. Yes, father. Yu Qianqiu bowed respectfully. The long sword behind him shot out with a kchang sound and carried him away like a ray of light. Instantly, everyone in the courtyard was dumbfounded. That leisurely flying celestial being was fortunately seen by a group of ordinary people. Someone immediately exclaimed, Heavens! Big Brother is a sword immortal. Ah! Sword immortal. All the relatives whispered to each other. Yu Qianggui was so excited that he was trembling slightly. He had told his son to go and come back quickly, but he didn't expect that he would use such a shocking method. Did he say something wrong? Sigh. Why did he say go and return quickly? One must know that a sword immortal would never show his true appearance in front of mortals. AI. My son is no longer an ordinary person. I was too abrupt. Fu Qing looked at the sword in his hand with a face full of surprise. Today, he was fortunate enough to be bestowed a sword by a sword immortal. This was a blessing that he had cultivated for 8 lifetimes. He held the sword with both hands and walked over to Yu Qianggui. He asked respectfully, Master, what should this lowly one do? Yu Qianggui stared at the sword in his hand and couldn't help but reach out to take it. He turned it over and over in his hand and examined it, causing the other clan members to look at it with envy. Yu Qianggui stood up from his chair and pulled out the sword. The sword was blue like autumn water. Under the sunlight, the sharp blade glowed with envy. Yu Qianggui stood up from his chair and pulled out his sword with a shwa sound. The blade of the sword was as clear as autumn water. Under the sunlight, the sharp edge of the sword was glowing. Good sword. It's really a good sword. All the relatives kept praising it. In fact, they couldn't tell if it was a good sword or not. They mainly thought that it was something from a sword immortal. How could it be bad? In addition, the sword looked so beautiful, so they naturally concluded that it was a good sword. This sword was personally refined by Yu Qianqiu, and there were many more in Utopia. As he could only control 100 flying swords, these were all in stock. However, compared to the treasured swords of the mortal world, this flying sword of the Dharma artifact level was incomparable in terms of workmanship and material. Yu Qianggui put the sword back into its scabbard and handed it to Fu Qing. This isn't an ordinary sword. It's the eldest young master's flying sword. Since the eldest young master has already given you the authority, just do as he says. You can mobilize all the servants in the residence. Go. The moment he said this, all the servants looked at Fu Qing with envy. Some of the unmarried maids looked at Fu Qing with splendor in their eyes. Yes. Fu Qing retreated. He never thought that a servant guarding the door would have such great authority. This thing was not inferior to an imperial sword. Thinking of the eldest young master's words, he didn't dare to delay. He hurriedly mobilized people and surrounded all the relatives. Yu Qianqiu still had some impression of the Octagon village's location. After leaving the Yu residence, it only took him a few moments to find the Octagon village's hideout in a mountainous area that was 100 miles away. He landed on the sword and immediately caused a commotion in the hideout. Yu Qianqiu sized up the village. It was built on the basis of danger. It was indeed a good place that was easy to defend and hard to attack. It was no wonder that even the authorities couldn't take it down. He squinted his eyes and stared at the signboard at the main entrance of the stronghold. On it were the words, Ji Hall. He snorted in his heart. It seemed like robbers liked to use this gimmick. At this moment, a group of people came out of the hall. All of them were holding shining swords and spears. Needless to say, the burly man in the middle was the leader of the bandit hideout. The man was stunned when he saw Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu was also stunned when he saw him. The burly man was wearing the same clothes as him. It was the standard clothes of the supporting immortal island. After a closer look, he was astonishingly at the 10th level of the Qi refinement realm. The man excitedly strode over and kowtowed. He said, "Luli greets Senior. Senior has come here, but the sect wants." He was so excited that he couldn't continue speaking. The group of bandits behind him were also dumbfounded. Yu Qianqiu was stunned again. He immediately understood everything. So this guy was also an unlucky person who was chased out of the supporting immortal island. No wonder the second leader knew a little about the cultivation world. Looking at this guy's expression, he probably thought that the supporting immortal island wanted to call him back. Wishful thinking. I was wondering who was causing trouble here. So it was the abandoned disciple of the supporting immortal island. You actually dared to wear the clothes of the supporting immortal island. You really don't want to live. Yu Qianqiu snorted. The man kowtowed again. Senior, please forgive me. After I left the supporting immortal island, I really didn't know how to survive. I could only bring a group of people to become bandits. Yu Qianqiu thought about it. A disciple who wasn't even at the foundation establishment stage couldn't even be compared to a martial arts expert. Moreover, most of them had lost contact with the outside world since they were young. They knew nothing about survival. Ling Feng and the others were also at a loss when they were just chased out. Like Guan Yu, he ended up pretending to be a Taoist in a Taoist temple to swindle people. Thinking about this, his anger dissipated a lot. He said in a deep voice, "You are Luli, right? Get up. I'm not here to catch up with you. Where is the kidnapped kid in the Yu residence?" Luli quickly got up and pointed to the horse pen. "That kid is locked up there. You didn't do anything to him, right?" Yu Qianqiu glanced at him coldly. No, not even a strand of hair is missing." Luli wasn't an idiot. He could tell that this kid was related to the people from the supporting immortal island. In his heart, he cursed the employer's ancestors, but he didn't know that he was also cursing Yu Qianqiu's ancestors. Yu Qianqiu slowly walked into the horse pen. Instantly, a rage burned in his chest. A kid whose face could be vaguely seen was about 8 or 9 years old. He was glaring at the people who came in. His body was covered with grass and horse dung. He was tied up tightly and his mouth was stuffed with a dirty cloth. His cheeks were swollen and there was a clear palm print. It was obvious that he had been slapped. This was his younger brother, Yu Wuqiu. He. This is what you meant by not even a strand of hair is missing. Yu Qianqiu glanced at Luli with a cold smile. He originally wanted to take him in for his own use. But now, he was sentenced to death on the spot. The latter was so scared that his head was full of sweat. He stuttered and didn't know what to say. Yu Qianqiu walked to the kid's side and pulled out the rag in his mouth. A trail of blood seeped out from the corner of his mouth. Who knew that the kid would spit out a mouthful of bloody saliva the moment he loosened his mouth? He opened his mouth and cursed, "Evil thieves, kill me if you have the guts. Otherwise, I will trample your den to the ground in the future." Yu Qianqiu, who was spat on his face, was stunned. Then, he smiled bitterly and wiped his face. This brat spoke without rhyme or reason. He didn't know how to beat around the bush. If he was really a bandit, seeing him like this, I'm afraid he would really eliminate the root of the problem to prevent future troubles. He immediately flicked his finger on the kid's forehead and scolded jokingly, "Brat, what are you spitting for?" "I'm Yu Qianqiu." "Bastard, how dare you flick my forehead? You're Yu Qianqiu, right? Okay, I'll remember you." You're Yu Qianqiu. Why is your name the same as my big brother's?" The kid's tattered face was crooked. "Nonsense, I'm your big brother. Father sent me to save you," Yu Qianqiu said unhappily. Chapter 144. There's no proof. The kid showed a suspicious expression. "What proof do you have to prove that you are my brother? Bastard, you're so smart. If you were smart, how could you be tied up here?" Yu Qianqiu flicked him again, causing him to cry out in pain. He casually broke the ropes binding him, got up, stared at Lu Li, and asked, "This was caused by Yu Zhangping's family and you, right? How did you know? Could it be that the second in command who went down the mountain told you?" Lu Li was shocked. Only he and the second head knew about this. He didn't tell anyone else. It was the second head who told him. It wasn't a good thing to betray one's employer. Yu Qianqiu sneered. With Yu Zhangping's character, he shows everything on his face. "Do you need someone to tell you? As for your second head, I saw that he wasn't feeling well, so I sent him to reincarnate. It's him." Suddenly, the kid pointed at his swollen face and said, "It was Yu Zhangping, that bastard. He tricked us out of the city. My face is swollen because of him." "Ah. You killed the second head. Then there are two other brothers?" Lu Li was shocked. Yu Qianqiu glanced at the child and didn't say anything. He turned back to size up Lu Li and asked curiously, "I say, Lu Li, have you been away from supporting Immortal Island for too long, or have water entered your brain? Do I need to report to you when I kill people? Stop talking nonsense with me. If it wasn't for the fact that we were from the same sect, your head would have been removed. Go and gather all your minions. I have something to say." Lu Li seemed to be drained of all his strength. He said dejectedly, "Yes," and walked out slowly. Maybe because he was tied up for too long, Yu Wuchou's limbs were a little stiff. Yu Qianqiu looked at him and smiled. "Can you still walk? Do you want me to carry you?" Yu Wuchou was embarrassed into anger. "Who wants you to carry me? I can walk by myself." He suddenly asked curiously, "Are you really my brother?" He kept looking at the stranger in front of him. "Follow me if you can." Yu Qianqiu couldn't be bothered to talk nonsense with him. He thought to himself, "You're just a little kid, yet you're already so arrogant. This is the problem of spoiling the children of big families. If this goes on, you'll be at a disadvantage. Today, I'll teach this cheap little brother a lesson, lest he doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth." Dang, dang, dang. The urgent sound of a gong rang outside, and the entire stronghold became lively. Lu Li stood on a small wooden platform and looked at the hundreds of subordinates that had gathered. His face was ashen and he did not make a sound, as if he had a premonition that something bad was about to happen. However, Yu Qianqiu's strength was not something he could fight against. To put it bluntly, killing him was as easy as killing an ant. A group of subordinates stood in an orderly manner below the platform. Yu Qianqiu snorted coldly in his heart. They were quite disciplined. He looked back at the little kid who was limping behind him and said, "Follow me." Lu Li took the lead and walked to the side of the wooden platform. The little kid struggled to climb up, but before he could stand firm, Yu Qianqiu grabbed the back of his collar and lifted him up. "Let go of me, I can walk." The little kid's struggle was futile. Yu Qianqiu pointed at the group of people below and said, "Originally, I wanted to let them go today, but you said you wanted to flatten this place. Fine, I'll fulfill your wish today." As soon as he finished speaking, Luli knelt down and begged, "Senior, please let them go. They have parents and children at the foot of the mountain. Their families depend on them to earn money. If they weren't forced to, they wouldn't have followed me up the mountain to become bandits. Once they're killed, their families won't be able to survive. Senior, please have mercy." The subordinates all looked terrified. They had all seen Yu Qianqiu descend from the sky. To them, those who could fly in the sky were like gods. Now that this god said he wanted to kill them, they immediately knelt down and begged for mercy. In an instant, the entire mountain camp was filled with begging voices. "What do you mean by taking care of the elderly and children? After you die, tell those words to the people you killed. Since you've come out to make a living, you must understand that sooner or later, you'll have to pay for what you did. It's not that I won't pay, it's that the time isn't right." Yu Qianqiu slowly said in a cold voice. "No. Senior, I beg you, no." Luli hugged his leg and begged. Scram! Yu Qianqiu directly kicked him off the platform. Then, he shook the little kid and shouted, "Watch carefully." In fact, Yu Wuqiu was already a little stunned. He had never seen so many people kneeling and begging. As soon as he finished speaking, nearly 100 cold lights shot out from the storage bag, crazily sweeping towards the people kneeling on the ground. In an instant, blood splattered everywhere, flesh and blood flew everywhere, and screams shook the sky. The little kid was stunned at first. When he came to his senses, his whole body trembled. He covered his eyes with his little hands, unable to watch anymore. Yu Qianqiu coldly snorted. "Today, he was going to kill this person for you to see. You have no choice but to watch." His thumb and index finger pinched the back of the little kid's neck, and a stream of true essence entered his body. The little kid's hands immediately drooped down, and his eyes were wide open. Witnessing the bloody, violent, and wanton killing in front of him, he could not speak, nor could he close his eyes. He could not move, and could only watch and listen. Crystal clear tears continuously flowed down his cheeks. Below the platform, Luli clenched his fists and knelt there with tears streaming down his face. He looked up to the sky and howled. But none of those wantonly killing flying swords touched him. Those who wanted to escape were immediately shredded into pieces by a few cold lights. There were also those who wanted to fight it out with Yu Qianqiu before they died. Unfortunately, they did not even have the chance to get close. Their legs were nowhere to be seen, and when they fell, they were already shredded into pieces. In just a short while, apart from Luli, not a single living person could be seen below. Broken limbs were everywhere, and the blood on the ground gathered into streams that flowed towards the lower ground. The smell of blood in the air was suffocating. After killing those who needed to be killed, Yu Qianqiu's divine sense moved, and 100 cold lights swept towards the various buildings in the village with an unstoppable momentum. Crashing sounds could be heard everywhere. Not long after, smoke and dust rose everywhere. Even the erected flagpole was not spared. The cold lights retracted, and the sounds disappeared. The surroundings finally quieted down, and only Lu Li's sobbing could be heard below the platform. The entire octagon village was no longer recognizable. Only the wooden platform under Yu Qianqiu's feet remained the same, standing there alone. Yu Qianqiu turned the little lad's head around and let him look around. He said, "Didn't you want to flatten this place? I've already done it for you, but what's wrong with you? Why don't you even dare to look? If you don't even dare to look, what gives you the right to say that you want to flatten this place?" Yu Qianqiu lifted him up and faced him, shouting, "Crying? Why are you crying? You only have this little guts, and this little bit of guts. Are you even worthy of saying such things?" As he spoke, he turned him around again, letting him witness the tragic scene around him. He spun around and shouted, "Do you see that? Originally, I did not intend to kill them, but you said you wanted to flatten this place. All right, it's flattened now. Why are you crying? Are you regretting it? Then why did you open your mouth and speak such nonsense? Let me tell you now, as a man, you must be responsible for every word you say. Everything in front of you is the result of your careless words. Look carefully at everything here. After a while, when he was almost done lecturing Luli, Yu Qianqiu bent over and picked up Luli. Then, he carried the two of them and flew away on his sword. Just as he stood up, the wooden platform collapsed. The entire Octagon village was completely flattened. Chapter 145. Inside the Yu clan's courtyard, Yu Qianqiu descended from the sky with two people in his hands, his long sword returning to its scabbard. Everyone was shocked when they saw Yu Wuchou's appearance. They didn't expect the Yu clan's young master, who usually lived a luxurious life, to end up like this, especially with the two palm prints on his face. When the patriarch and his son saw the people brought by Yu Qianqiu, their faces turned deathly pale. Yu Changgui waved his hand to disperse the crowd, then hurriedly walked up to his son, who had a lifeless expression on his face, and asked anxiously, "Wuchou, what happened to you?" "Father, he's fine." "He was just a little frightened," Yu Qianqiu said calmly. At this moment, Yu Wuchou was awoken by his father's familiar face. When he came back to his senses, he saw that Yu Qianqiu was like he had seen a ghost. He hurriedly hid behind Yu Changgui, hugged his arm, and pointed at Yu Qianqiu, screaming, "Father, he killed people. He really killed people. He killed so many people. So many people died." Everyone looked at Yu Qianqiu at the same time, but they clearly weren't surprised that he had killed people. Yu Changgui looked at his eldest son, puzzled, and asked, "What happened?" "It's nothing. It's just a few hundred small fries from the Octagon camp. I casually took care of them. In the future, there won't be any more Octagon camp bandits in this area," Yu Qianqiu said with a calm smile. He said it lightly, but everyone's hair stood on end. A few hundred people were all killed by him in less than 4 hours. The more they thought about it, the colder they felt. When did the Yu clan have such a killer? You killed them all? Yu Changgui frowned. Obviously, he was a little unhappy with his son's massacre. "I didn't kill them all. I left one alive." Yu Qianqiu shook his head and pointed at the man lying on the ground. He sneered and said, "This is the Octagon Stronghold's big leader, Luli. He has a close relationship with our patriarch and his son. I've already asked him, and he's already explained everything. This time, the kidnapping of my younger brother was the doing of the sanctimonious patriarch of our Yu clan, father and son. Their goal was to steal our clan's wealth. They were going to kill the hostages as soon as they got the gold, and then think of a way to get rid of my father, so that there would be no successor for our family, and then find a reason to swallow our property." The two handprints on his younger brother's face were personally slapped by Yu Zhongping after he tricked him out of the city. "It's just that they never expected me to come back at this time." The Yu clan's relatives immediately went into an uproar. They instantly distanced themselves from the father and son. It would be best if they didn't get hurt by this killer. Yu Qianqiu sneered in his heart. Just by looking at the father and son's expression, he knew that this wasn't something that his son could do alone. "This daddy doesn't have time to be long-winded with you. I'll first make up a crime for you. In any case, it's just that. If I didn't care about this old man's face, would have killed you long ago." Yu Changgui's complexion turned ashen. He fiercely turned his head and glared at the father and son. He shouted, "Unsatisfied beasts, what else do you two dogs have to say?" When the patriarch and his son saw Yu Qianqiu bring Luli and Yu Wuchou here, they knew that everything was over. They originally wanted to quibble, but when they saw the gloomy expression in Yu Qianqiu's eyes, they couldn't say anything. In the face of such a powerful opponent, any kind of explanation was unnecessary. Suddenly, Yu Chongping rushed out of the crowd and knelt in front of Yu Changgui's feet. He repeatedly kowtowed and said, "Big brother, I was blinded by greed. Big brother, for the sake of being from the same clan, please spare me this time." As he spoke, he slapped his own mouth. Yu Changgui kicked him away and sternly shouted, "Bastard, I don't have a brother like you. Come, tie up this father and son pair and send them to the government office together with this bandit. Several able-bodied men immediately took ropes and tied up the three men tightly, and then they were pushed out of the room. The Yu clan's relatives shook their heads and sighed. They didn't expect this sanctimonious father and son pair to have such wild ambitions. How many people didn't covet this family's wealth? Wait. Yu Changgue suddenly sighed and said, forget it, family shame shouldn't be spread in public. Just send them to the ancestral hall and deal with them according to the clan's rules. Then he cupped his hands towards the other clan members and said, I hope that when we carry out the clan's rules, the clan members can be witnesses. That's right. Family shame shouldn't be spread in public. Of course. Don't worry, big brother. We all saw it with our own eyes, so we must be witnesses. Everyone agreed. Yu Changgue was the clan's biggest financial backer. If they didn't do him a favor, then when would they do him a favor? In any case, they wouldn't lose anything. At this time, Yu Qianqiu suddenly stood up with a smile and bowed to everyone, saying, Junior also has a matter to ask of all the uncles and brothers. Junior came back this time because of my father's summons. Since this matter is over, Junior still needs to go out and cultivate. As for this matter, I hope that all the uncles and brothers can keep it a secret for Junior. Just pretend that Junior never appeared in this matter, please. As soon as he finished speaking, everyone immediately agreed, but the atmosphere from before was gone. Although they were all clan members, the crux of the matter was that this fellow was too ruthless. Killing people was like cutting vegetables, and he didn't even blink. Who knew what the consequences would be if they said the wrong thing? But from his words, everyone thought of one thing. It turned out that there was such a powerful son hiding behind Yu Changgue, and he could summon him at any time, but he had never said anything about it. How sinister. Fortunately, they hadn't offended him too much. Otherwise, if something happened, it would be a massacre. Who could resist that? Everyone shuddered at the thought of it. Yu Qianqiu smiled and thanked them. This was the effect he wanted. It wasn't easy for him to come back, so he had no choice but to use such a ruthless method. Since they had met, he had to get rid of them completely. In the future, he wouldn't place his thoughts here. A group of clan members and servants escorted the three people out of the Yu residence. The surroundings instantly became much quieter. Yu Wuchou hid behind his father, craning his neck to secretly size up this elder brother of his. This elder brother was really a little too scary. Yu Qianqiu smiled at him. He had thought that Yu Wuchou had been frightened, and he had to adjust his emotions a little to prevent it from leaving a shadow in his heart. Now, it seemed that this brat was born with courage, and there was no need to worry. What you said just now was all true? Yu Changgue looked at him and frowned. Yu Qianqiu was stunned, and he asked in surprise, what was true? You said that you still had to go out to cultivate. Didn't you come back with success this time? Yu Changgue asked. Yu Wuchou, who was behind him, suddenly shook him and asked, Father, is he really my elder brother, Yu Qianqiu? Yu Changgue lowered his head and shouted, Bastard, if he isn't your elder brother, who else could he be? Yu Wuchou pointed at Yu Qianqiu and said embarrassedly, but he killed a lot of people. Father, he really killed a lot of people. Hundreds of people were all killed by him. Ignorant. Yu Changgue shouted, if your elder brother didn't want to save you, would he have killed so many people? When he remembered that the Octagon village had kidnapped both of his sons, he felt a wave of disgust in his heart. He thought that it was good to kill them. If they didn't kill them, who knew when they would kidnap his grandson again? Yu Qianqiu smiled and suddenly reached out to Fu Qing, who was standing not far away. The sword that Fu Qing was holding flew into his hand, causing the latter to panic. Yu Qianqiu handed the sword to his brother and said with a smile, Take it. Chapter 146. When Yu Wuchou saw that the sword could fly by itself, his eyes were already full of stars. When he saw his big brother telling him to hold it, he greedily looked at it and looked up at his father. Seeing his father nod his head, he shyly reached out to take it and held it tightly in his arms. He looked at his big brother and finally had a good impression of him. He still had the mind of a child. Yu Qianzhou smiled and said, "Wuchou, can you write now?" Yu Wuchou nodded his head and said, "I could write when I was 4. Not bad." Yu Qianzhou turned his head and shouted to Fucking, "Bring a short table over and prepare a brush, ink and paper." Fucking hurriedly went to prepare. Yu Changgui looked at his 2 sons and didn't know what they were going to do. After a while, all the tools were set up. Yu Qianzhou pointed to the table and smiled at his brother. "Wuchou, big brother has something to say to you. I will speak and you write. Write down everything I say. I want to test if you can really write." Hearing him say this, Yu Wuchou's childish eagerness to win was aroused. He walked over and put the sword on the table. He grabbed the writing brush and dipped it in the ink. He stared at his brother with big eyes, waiting for him to speak. Yu Qianzhou thought for a while and walked over to his side and said with a smile, "I am the eldest son of the family. I should be filial to my parents and share my father's worries. But I am young and frivolous. I want to pursue the great way, but the great way is vague. This road is full of ups and downs, but I must pursue it. I dare not be distracted and I am ashamed to face my parents. Today, I will take up the brush and entrust a heavy task to me." At this point, Yu Wuchou knew what he meant and looked back at his big brother in shock. Yu Changgui's eyebrows knitted together. Yu Qianzhou pursed his lips and signaled his brother to continue writing. He sighed and said, "From today onwards, big brother's heavy responsibility will be entrusted to me. Brother must remember that when we were in the bandits' lair, big brother used the blood of hundreds of bandits to teach you. You must know that only by enduring the hardships of hardships can one rise above others. One must not indulge in riches and honor, one must guard against arrogance and rashness, one must be filial to one's parents, one must inherit the family business, and one must carry forward the family's name. Brother, I hope you will remember this great trust." After he finished speaking, he also finished writing. Although his handwriting wasn't very good, the meaning of the words was simple and clear. Yu Wuchou was still a little confused about the great Tao in front of him. He only knew that his brother was going out to do something big, and everything in the family was going to be entrusted to him. Looking at the words on the paper, he pouted for a long time before reluctantly saying, "I will remember big brother's words." "Ha! It's good that you've remembered it. Keep what you've written well. If I come back one day and find that you've failed to do it, you're still acting like a thief in a den of thieves. You don't have any real ability, but you're still spouting nonsense. Just wait and see how I'll deal with you then." Yu Qianzhou laughed. Yu Wuchou pouted higher and higher. Yu Changgui, on the other hand, was distressed. Originally, when he saw that his eldest son had returned, he thought that someone was going to inherit the family business. The tradition of the Hua Xia Empire was that the eldest son would inherit the family business. Now that the eldest son had borrowed his second son's pen to express his intentions clearly, it was equivalent to indirectly answering the previous question. The path that he had walked on must be incomparably difficult, and he was afraid that it would be difficult to turn back. That's why he did this. He had put in a lot of effort. Yu Changgui couldn't say anything more. Now that his son's real situation was in front of him, he was no longer an ordinary person and couldn't force him to stay. He could only regret why he agreed to his son's request back then. He sighed and said, "Fu Qing, put up the second young master's calligraphy and hang it in his room." "Yes." Fu Qing respectfully accepted the order. Speaking of which, Fu Qing was really happy today. Master and young master would always look for him whenever something happened. His future was probably going to change. "When are we leaving?" Yu Changgui sighed. Yu Qianzhou was startled. He originally wanted to leave right away, but thinking that it was too much. He hadn't returned for almost 10 years, what's the matter if he delayed for a day? He smiled and replied, "Then let's stay one more night." Yu Changgui understood the meaning behind his words. He waved his hand and called for the servants to prepare a banquet. The father and son trio walked towards Shuarenyang. Yu Wuchou hugged the sword happily. Just as he reached the door, he saw Xuanyang coming out. When the latter saw her youngest son, she immediately hugged him and burst into tears. Yu Qianqiu had a toothache when he heard this. They hadn't seen each other for almost 10 years, but his mother still loved to cry. Both he and his father turned their heads to the side. Ah! How did my son become like this? Ah! Who slapped him on his face? Xuanyang asked anxiously. Yu Changgui's face twitched. He turned his head and said, I say, are you done yet? Such a small injury will be fine in 2 days. Can't you see boss is here? Why are you crying all the time? Ah! Xuanyang stood up. When she saw Yu Qianqiu, she threw herself at him and cried, where did my son go for so many years? Don't tell me you don't even want your mother anymore. Woo woo. Yu Qianqiu gritted his teeth and pushed her away. He smiled bitterly, Mother, your son hasn't eaten for a long time. My stomach is really hungry. Ah. Then why didn't you say so earlier? Xuanyang wiped away her tears and said, you wait, I will personally get it for you. She then led the servant girl away. Phew. The father and son let out a breath and looked at each other. Xiao Wuqiu shook his head and sighed, I really can't stand mother like this. I would rather stay in the thieves' den for a few more days. Bastard, what did you say? Yu Changgui shouted. The little fellow stuck out his tongue and quickly changed the topic. Big brother, I am too dirty. I will go take a bath first. Otherwise, I won't be able to attend the banquet later. He then ran away. Soon, the family of 4 sat at the sumptuous dinner table. With his mother's persuasion, Yu Qianqiu ate until he was full. Although it was a little uncomfortable, he enjoyed the warm feeling. That night, in Yu Changgui's study room, the father and son had a deep conversation. Yu Qianqiu gave them 3 sealed porcelain bottles as an explanation. After that, Yu Qianqiu asked someone to invite his mother over. In front of the 2 elders, he took out 2 rui elixirs that were shining with rainbow light and handed them to them. The couple looked at the beads in their hands with their mouths agape. After a long time, Yu Changgui was moved and said, Is this an immortal elixir? Yu Qianqiu smiled indifferently and said, More or less. Father, mother, just take it. This elixir has the effect of preserving one's appearance for a long time. It can also detoxify and nourish one's appearance. After taking it, one will be immune to all kinds of poison. However, there are some side effects after taking it. You have to be prepared beside the toilet bowl and bathtub. Hearing the benefits, the couple directly filtered out the side effects. Yu Changgui solemnly swallowed the rainbow light into his mouth. However, he was not used to this quail egg-sized thing, so it took a lot of effort to swallow it down his throat. Xuanyang was about to swallow it, but she stopped and said, I think I don't need it. Leave it for your brother. Have you used it before, my son? Yu Qianqiu sighed in his heart. All mothers in the world were great. He smiled and said, My brother is still young. Do you want him to stay like this for the rest of his life? I will take care of his matters. Mother, you don't have to worry too much. As for the elixir, I have already used it. You can take it with ease. Only then did Xuanyang feel at ease and swallow it. After coming out, he did not sleep in his original room that night. Instead, he slept with his brother. He told the boy many things, but he did not know if he could remember them. The next morning, the family could no longer find him. Only then did they realize that Yu Qianqiu had left quietly. Yu Changgui stood in the garden with his son, who was holding a sword. The former let out a long sigh. Chapter 147. Yu Qianqiu originally wanted to spend the night peacefully before leaving. After lying in bed with his brother and chatting for a while, the little fellow fell asleep in a daze, perhaps because he was too tired. Looking at the sleeping little fellow, Yu Qianqiu felt emotional. He considered if he should help the little fellow to a position that ordinary people couldn't reach. After some thought, he gave up. This family didn't have many people to begin with, and he was leaving. Furthermore, no one knew what the future held for them. Sometimes, there were some things that he wasn't confident in. If he wasn't careful, he might bring disaster to the family. It was best to let the family live peacefully. He tried his best not to let them get involved in those illusory matters. He could do whatever he wanted alone. Having a family to feed them would only be a burden to both of them. It was too dangerous. Unable to sleep late at night, Yu Qianqiu decided to leave when he thought of how his mother would definitely be crying when they parted the next day. Although he said that he was leaving, he had actually returned to Utopia in an instant. Now, any place was extremely close to him, but it was also extremely far away. It was also late at night in Utopia. However, Ethereal Palace on Ethereal Peak was like a starry sky. It was extremely charming under the embellishment of fluorite. The messy names of Ethereal Peak and Ethereal Palace were all given by Yu Qianqiu. The main reason was that he couldn't think of any good names, so he used them as if he had heard them somewhere before. As soon as Yu Qianqiu appeared in Misty Palace, he heard a familiar horn sound from afar. He turned his head to look and murmured, "Emergency assembly signal. Is Yunchang training for night raids again? Let's take a look." There was a field in the middle of a row of wooden and stone houses that took up an area of nearly 1,000 meters. At that moment, the field was surrounded by flames. A group of people rushed out of the houses and lined up neatly in 3 groups. Yu Qianqiu quietly appeared on top of a building to observe. The people in front of him were the original 400 disciples from the various sections. After eliminating the female disciples, there were 309 people left. Thus, under Yu Qianqiu's suggestion, Guan Yu divided them into 3 companies. Each company had 103 people, with a company commander. Each company was further divided into 3 platoons, each platoon consisting of 34 people. Each platoon had a platoon leader. Each platoon was divided into 3 classes, and each class had 11 people. Each class had a squad leader. The 3 company commanders were 3 late nascent soul cultivators, and the platoon leaders and squad leaders were also nascent soul cultivators. At the same cultivation level, these positions were usually taken by cultivators who were good at commanding. Guan Yu immediately discovered that the efficiency of training had greatly increased after the division management. In front of the field, a large black triangular flag was hung on a flagpole. If one were to look at it carefully under the light of the flames, they could vaguely see 2 large golden characters embroidered on it, "Hero." Next to the flagpole, on a stone platform, Guan Yu was dressed in black, with a black scarf wrapped around his head. He swept his cold gaze across the field with an extraordinary bearing, nodding his head in satisfaction. Suddenly, he shouted in a deep voice, "Company commander, come up to the stage to receive the battle plan." He then took out 3 jade archives. The 3 men standing in front of the 3 teams rushed up to the stone platform. They each received a jade archive from Guan Yu and immediately scanned it with their divine sense. Once they were done, they returned the jade archives and dashed to the front of their respective teams. The 3 of them shouted to the members of their respective teams, "Dress according to the requirements of battle plan number 3. Carry the appropriate weapons. You are required to assemble within 5 minutes. Dismissed." Whoosh! In an instant, all 3 teams rushed back to their rooms. Not long after, one by one, they rushed out dressed in black, with black scarves wrapped around their heads. After they were in position, the company commanders gathered their platoon commanders and squad leaders and quickly passed down the battle plan. Finally, one by one, the company commanders reported to Guan Yu, reporting. "First company is ready. Reporting. Second company is ready. Reporting. Third company is ready." Guan Yu nodded and shouted, "Order." Once the target has entered the encirclement, the first round of attack will be concentrated by all 3 companies. We must inflict the greatest amount of damage to the target. Once we achieve the desired effect, immediately move on to the second round of attack. First company and third company will be the main attackers, while second company will support them. Also, seize the spoils of war as fast as possible. Considering that the target may have a large number of reinforcements, once this situation is discovered, third company will immediately switch from the main attack to a defensive position. If the defensive position is not ideal, first company and second company will quickly return to support. Gather the greatest fighting strength possible and retreat quickly. If the situation becomes extremely dire, first company and second company will retreat, while third company will cover the rear. Understood? Understood. The shouts shook the heavens. With a wave of Guan Yu's hand, the company commanders turned around and shouted, "Move out." With the order, over 300 people pulled the black scarves from their necks to their noses, revealing only their eyes. They quickly flew into the sky, with Guan Yu following closely behind. In an instant, the entire field became quiet, with only the flickering of fire. Standing on the roof, Yu Qianqiu shook his head and sighed, "Not bad." From the time of the emergency assembly to the time of departure, it took less than 10 minutes. Sigh. But their weapons are different, and their cultivation methods are also different. I wonder if they can unleash the greatest power in a group battle. Looks like I'll have to find an opportunity to drag them out and test it out. Currently, Yu Qianqiu was the only one living in the small courtyard, and it was very quiet. Yang Qian was also very perceptive. When he saw that the direct disciple of the Alchemy Pavilion's managing elder and the daughter of the 10,000 Fragrance Gardens managing elder were together, he no longer assigned anyone to this courtyard. After the death of the Alchemy Pavilion's external deacon, Yan Shu, Guan Weiwu had not found anyone to replace him. For the time being, the internal deacon, Yang Qian, was in charge of all these miscellaneous matters. He had practically become the Alchemy Pavilion's chief steward and had a lot of power. Yu Qianqiu leisurely walked towards the main hall of the Alchemy Pavilion. Many disciples would call him Martial Uncle when they saw him, and those of the same generation would greet each other. Those of a higher generation would also nod at him. As for the fact that his cultivation had already reached the core formation stage, he did not tell anyone on Fuxian Island. All in all, these days were quite comfortable. Thinking back to what Gu Qingyun had said when he saw his carefree life, he said, "You're the best." For someone of my cultivation, in a place like the Cultivation Pavilion, where experts are as common as clouds, it would be tiring to just greet and greet. It would be best for me to obediently hide and cultivate and not come out. Do you know where Deacon Yang is? Yu Qianqiu pulled a disciple over and asked. He had come to find Yang Qian. After the disciple greeted him, he told him that Yang Qian was in the main hall. When he walked into the main hall, he saw Yang Qian looking around. "Deacon Yang!" Yu Qianqiu shouted. Yang Qian turned around and saw that it was him. He shook his head and said with a smile, "It's really difficult to see you even once. Tell me, why did you take the initiative to find me this time? Look at what you're saying. Aren't you too busy right now? I don't want to disturb you so often." Yu Qianqiu joked. The two of them had always had a good relationship and would often joke around like this when they met. "I still have things to do. If you have something to say, just say it," Yang Qian said bluntly. Yu Qianqiu nodded and asked, "I heard that all the sects are going to send more people to the Cultivation Alliance. Is this true? You still don't know if it's true or not. Didn't the person in Wanfen Garden tell you?" Yang Qian smiled meaningfully. "I only heard about this. I don't know the specifics. Otherwise, I wouldn't have come to disturb you." "Oh." Yang Qian smiled noncommittally. He paused and said, "It's true. The cause is the matter between Anquangsung and the Demon Blood Palace. Both sides have stopped fighting, but this time, many sects were involved. Regarding Anquangsung always stirring up trouble, all the righteous sects in the cultivation world are very angry. Therefore, they decided to strengthen the Cultivation Alliance in name only. It will truly play a role of fair adjudication. Those sects that cause trouble will be punished together. Right now, all the sects are discussing the specifics. I reckon that in a few days, they will send people to put it into action." Yu Qianqiu nodded in thought. So it was like this. He understood. Yang Qian looked at him and said strangely, "Why do you ask? Do you want to go?" I advise you not to think about it. This kind of thing is usually led by the people of the cultivation pavilion. It has nothing to do with the people of the other sections. Chapter 148. What kind of logic is this? Yu Qianqiu frowned. Everyone is a disciple of Fuxian Island. Why is the cultivation pavilion in charge of this matter? Isn't the sect being a little too biased by doing this? His voice grew louder as he spoke. He wasn't excited, but he really wanted this chance to leave the island. With the name of Fuxian Island, Kuangsung believed that everything would go smoothly. So what if the other party recognized that this Yu Qianqiu was that Yu Qianqiu? As long as he could see Chu Ping, or fulfill his promise, he would just deny it. He didn't believe that Kuangsung would dare to detain a disciple of Fuxian Island. Even if he took a step back, could they detain him? As for what kind of trouble he would cause, that was a matter for the future. He had been away from Chu Ping, for too long. On the surface, he looked like he was living comfortably, but who knew that there was a thorn in his throat? He couldn't eat or sleep well. He wanted to go according to his plan, but the time was too torturous. Who knew how long he would have to wait? Lower your voice. How dare you speak so carelessly? Yang Qian dragged him to a remote place outside the hall. He was slightly annoyed. Who said that the sect is biased? The disciples that are sent out represent the face of supporting Immortal Island. They might encounter unexpected situations at any time. That's why the cultivation pavilion has to choose the most elite disciples of the same cultivation level. How can you say that the sect is biased? Don't the other branches have elite disciples? Why do we have to choose from the cultivation pavilion? Yu Qianqiu was a little restless, so his words were a little direct. Yang Qian was indeed a little angry. A foundation establishment disciple actually dared to speak to him in such a tone. Then, he thought of the two principal elders standing behind him and calmed himself down. Then, he said earnestly, "You've been on supporting Immortal Island for a long time. You have to know your priorities. What is the master?" The cultivation pavilion was the foundation of the entire supporting Immortal Island. Every generation's sect master was a principal elder of the cultivation pavilion, so the cultivation pavilion was the master. The existence of the other branches is to cooperate with the cultivation pavilion. This is the first time. Seeing that Yu Qianqiu's face was still dark, he explained again, "This trip to the cultivation alliance isn't like usual. We'll have to work with other sects for a long time. To put it bluntly, the people who go out are related to the reputation of Fuxian Island, the #1 sect in the world. Those who can go are the elite disciples of various cultivation periods. The sect has already decided that in addition to appointing a pavilion of cultivation elder as the person in charge, 3 days from now, there will be a selection competition at the pavilion of cultivation to select 5 nascent soul disciples and 10 core formation disciples. Foundation establishment disciples will not be included." His last sentence was undoubtedly telling Yu Qianqiu, "You're still in the foundation establishment stage, don't count on it." Yu Qianqiu furrowed his brows and asked, "What kind of screening method? Did the sect stipulate that only disciples of the pavilion of cultivation can participate?" "No, as long as you're in the nascent soul or core formation stage, you can participate. The nascent soul disciples will be in the top 5, and the core formation disciples will be in the top 10. However, according to convention, the other branches won't participate. In fact, they don't have to participate. You can imagine the result. On one side are disciples who have no time to cultivate, and on the other side are disciples who put all their energy into cultivation. Among the disciples of the same level, how many can be a match for the pavilion of cultivation?" Yu Qianqiu happily said, "Deacon Yang, if I want to participate, where do I go to sign up?" Seeing that this guy still didn't give up, Yang Qian said with a slightly unhappy expression, "What? Did you just ignore what I just said? Didn't you hear me say that foundation establishment disciples can't participate?" "Who said I'm a foundation establishment disciple?" said Yu Qianqiu with a smile. He stretched out a palm and a plume of smoke rose up from his palm. In an instant, 3 Bingdi lotuses were condensed, swaying in the wind in a lifelike manner. Two of the lotuses were in full bloom. The other one was still a bud and hadn't bloomed yet, but it clearly told the other party that his cultivation had reached the early stage of core formation. Early stage of core formation. Yang Qian was dumbstruck. If he remembered correctly, when Yu Qianshou first came to Fuxin Island, he was only at the 10th level of qi refining. It had only been 6 or 7 years, but he had already reached the early stage of core formation. How was this possible? But the truth was right in front of him. Without this cultivation, it was impossible to release one's vitality and form 3 vivid twin lotuses. Yang Qian's throat trembled. He himself had spent more than 50 years to reach the early stage of core formation, which was not bad. After a long time, he said, core formation disciples can go to Penglai Pavilion's utility hall to register for the competition. Suddenly, he remembered something and changed the topic. Wait for me here, don't leave yet. With that, he ran away. Yu Qianshou was startled and didn't know what he was going to do. After waiting for a while, he saw Yang Qian and Guan Weiwu rushing over. He groaned in his heart. Damn it. Looks like I have to bleed a little this time. Otherwise, I won't be able to fool them. Guan Weiwu walked up to him and asked with a serious expression, are you really at the early stage of core formation? What is going on? You should know that this is not a small matter. Yu Qianshou bowed and said, it's all my fault. I shouldn't have hidden it from you. I have something to say to you in private. I also want to go to your pill room to show you something. You want to go to my pill room? Guan Weiwu's eyes flashed as he looked at his favorite disciple and said, follow me. Yu Qianshou obediently followed his master to the elder's pill room under the alchemy pavilion. Yang Qian knew that the master and disciple had something private to talk about, so he didn't follow. Guan Weiwu turned around and said, there's only the two of us here. If you have something to say, say it. Yu Qianshou embarrassedly said, I deserve to die. I shouldn't have hidden it from you. In fact, I have long since developed a better method to make the vitality pill. However, I was blinded by greed and secretly made a lot of it for myself. That's why I was able to forcefully raise my cultivation to the core formation stage in a few years. His voice became softer and softer as if he had made a huge mistake. What? Guan Weiwu cried out in surprise, is what you said true? Then, his face was full of surprise. He eagerly rubbed his palms and regretfully said, why didn't you say so earlier? AI. Why didn't you say so earlier? Damn it. If it wasn't for this competition and the fact that the 10,000 Fragrance Garden has a limited supply of spirit herbs, I wouldn't have said it even if I was beaten to death. Yu Qianshou muttered in his heart and explained, actually, I wanted to tell Master long ago, but I made a mistake first, so I didn't dare to say it. This time, I heard that there is a competition at the Cultivation Pavilion, but no one from my Alchemy Pavilion is participating. This disciple can't take this lying down and wants to compete with the disciples of the Cultivation Pavilion. That's why I said this. I hope Master can see this disciple's sincerity and help this disciple out of this predicament. This disciple promises not to do this again. Let's not talk about this for now. There are spirit herbs for refining the vitality pill. First, refine a furnace for me to see. Guan Weiwu pointed to a pile of spirit herbs to the side with an anxious expression. Yu Qianshou shook his head with a bitter smile and said, the Pavilion of Cultivation's competition requires those who are at least core formation to participate. Because of this, I revealed my cultivation level. I thought about how I would refine pills for myself. I don't know what the consequences would be if word got out. Right now, my heart is in a mess. How could I still have the mood to refine pills? Guan Weiwu was surprised and immediately shouted, who dares to say that you did it for yourself? If anyone dares to say that, tell them to come find me. Everything was clearly arranged by me, so what are you worried about? He then laughed mischievously and said, good disciple, come, refine a furnace for Master to see. Master will take care of everything else for you, so you don't need to worry. Chapter 149. AI. This kind of thing, he could only fool him. In fact, he didn't know how many origin chi pills he would need to take to break through from foundation establishment to core formation. To be able to be so fast was all because of the top-grade spirit stones. Yu Qianqiu bowed to the ground again. Thank you, Master, for your help. No need to be so polite. Quickly let Master see how you refine the origin chi pills. Guan Weiwu couldn't wait any longer. Yu Qianqiu immediately picked up a few spiritual herbs, threw them into the furnace, and concentrated on refining. Guan Weiwu's divine sense followed and once again witnessed his disciple's miraculous refining technique. He shook his head and sighed. He couldn't figure out what was going on. With his own alchemy attainments, he couldn't learn such a technique. Yu Qianqiu also couldn't figure out why his master was so stupid. Even that brat Chen Feng had learned his refining technique quite well, but he still couldn't get the hang of it. Perhaps it was because he didn't teach him diligently. But he was his master, and the disciple teaching his master was too embarrassing for anyone to ask. Yu Qianqiu actually didn't know that his refining technique was actually faster for newcomers who had never come into contact with alchemy. The more experienced they were, the more they would have their own deep-rooted beliefs. It wasn't something that could be changed easily. 20 origin chi pills were fresh out of the furnace. Guan Weiwu looked at the hazy pill halo in his hand and sighed again and again. So it's like this, disciple. You're really a genius. Master pondered for a lifetime and couldn't figure it out, but, AI. Master will help you ask the sect for credit. Don't, Master, please don't do this again. Actually, without Master's strong support, I wouldn't have been able to comprehend the refining method with peace of mind. This credit should be Master's. Yu Qianqiu said sincerely. In his heart, he thought, I'll only be at ease if you accept the benefits. Unexpectedly, Guan Weiwu shook his head and smiled bitterly. What kind of person do you think Master is? In the end, Yu Qianqiu rejected it a few times, but it still didn't work. When it came to respecting intellectual property rights, the old man was fair and just, leaving people speechless. It was easy to imagine what happened next. Sect Master Feng Xiangtian arrived with a group of elders. After confirming the truth, Yu Qianqiu almost couldn't raise his head due to the praise. Feng Xiangtian was so happy that he immediately ordered people to give Yu Qianqiu 10,000 upper-grade spirit stones. This really shocked the surrounding people. All the elders looked at this millionaire with a strange expression. This was not a small amount of money, but it was indeed worth it compared to his contribution. The sect leader happily led the group of people away. Guan Weiwu pulled Yu Qianqiu to the side and quietly explained some things to him. The latter was pleasantly surprised and nodded repeatedly to thank his master, while the former began to arrange the refining plan of the essence chi pill in the alchemy pavilion. Yu Qianqiu never got involved in this kind of thing. He left the alchemy pavilion and went directly to Penglai Pavilion. When he arrived at the miscellaneous hall's chore office and asked to participate in the Pavilion of Cultivation's competition, the disciples in the chore office looked at each other in dismay. They didn't expect a disciple of the alchemy pavilion to participate in this competition. According to the rules, they had to accept it, but when they checked Yu Qianqiu's cultivation, they found that it was still early-stage foundation establishment. Thus, they told him that he had to go to the Pavilion of Cultivation to prove his cultivation as early-stage core formation before he was qualified to participate in this competition. Yu Qianqiu immediately went to the Pavilion of Cultivation and found that he couldn't prove his cultivation beyond his cultivation level. As a result, he went from mid-stage foundation establishment to late-stage foundation establishment to early-stage core formation in one go, causing the elders who helped him to be a bit confused. He didn't care about this and went to the Penglai Pavilion's chore office again. He finally successfully signed up to participate in the Pavilion of Cultivation's competition. Just as he was about to leave the chore office, he ran into someone he really didn't want to see. Someone who looked at him with hostility every time they met. Yu Qianqiu bowed and said, "Elder Yan." With that, he was about to leave. "Yu Qianqiu, take care," the chore office's head Elder Yan Ta said coldly. Yu Qianqiu stopped, turned around, and said respectfully, "Elder Yan, what's the matter?" Yan Ta said in a deep voice, "Why do you hide when you see me?" Did you do something shameful? Elder Yen must be joking. Disciple wouldn't dare. I have something to ask you. Do you dare to answer me honestly? Disciple will definitely tell you everything I know. Actually, Yu Qianshou wasn't afraid of him, but he really didn't want to provoke him. After staying on supporting Immortal Island for so many years, Yu Qianshou more or less knew some things. Although supporting Immortal Island was known as the #1 sect in the cultivation world, it wasn't a monolithic entity. It was actually controlled by a few internal forces. These forces had always been competing in the dark, and they all wanted to take control of supporting Immortal Island. Starting from Ma Zhigu's generation, the Guan family produced many talented people, and that generation started to take control of supporting Immortal Island. When it came to Guan Dinghai's generation, because of his daughter's matter, Guan Dinghai was pushed down from the position of sect master by the opposition. However, the Guan family didn't want to hand over the power to the opposition. Normally, the position would be passed to the next generation, Guan Weiwu. However, Guan Weiwu was too disappointing and couldn't take up such a big responsibility. In the end, the Guan family pushed Guan Dinghai's eldest personal disciple, Feng Xiangtian, to the position of sect master. It should be said that the power of supporting Immortal Island still belonged to the Guan family. As for Yu Qianshou, as Guan Weiwu's personal disciple, he was also a member of the Guan family. In the past, Yu Qianshou didn't know about it, so he always went against Yan Shu. Now that he knew and understood that Yan Shu happened to be a member of the opposition, he couldn't help but feel that it was a close call. If he wasn't careful, he would be involved in the competition between the major forces. That wasn't a joke. Any one of them could be stronger than a sect like Onquangsung. He really couldn't afford to offend them. Yan Tuo stroked his beard and said in a deep voice, I heard something recently. I heard that during the Demon Ghost Region's trial, when the Ghost General killed the disciples of various sects in a big tent, you were also in that big tent. Is that true? Yes. I also heard that you have a good relationship with the Ghost General and saved many people. Why didn't you save the people in the big tent as well? When Yan Tuo said this, his tone revealed a bit of fierceness. Obviously, he was still brooding over his son's death. Damn it. Your son wanted to kill me that time, but he was already killed by me in advance. You still want me to save him? Old bastard, is there something wrong with your head? Yu Qianshou sighed and said, Elder Yan, you may not know this, but at that time, the Ghost General ordered us to meet him within an hour. A group of disciples with weaker cultivation really had nowhere to hide, so we could only do as he said. As a result, some disciples disobeyed the Ghost General's order, which made the Ghost General furious. At that time, I begged him bitterly, but the Ghost General never showed mercy to those who dared to disobey him, so. Sigh. Yan Tuo's face twitched for a while before he asked again, with the Ghost General's strength, killing them is naturally a piece of cake. Why did he have to capture them in the tent before killing them? Old bastard, I asked the Ghost General to do this in order to kill your son. How dare you be so fierce to me, you see how I'll deal with you. Yu Qianshou paused and said, Elder Yan, I won't hide it from you. Actually, I've been suspecting something. Don't talk in riddles with me. Yan Tuo snorted coldly. Yu Qianshou nodded and said with a troubled expression, I accidentally heard something at that time, and I don't know if I heard it wrong. I didn't dare to say it because it's not a small matter after all. Actually, I suspect that those people are not dead. Yan Tuo's body trembled, and he grabbed Yu Qianshou's shoulder and said while gasping for breath, What did you say? What did you hear at that time? Why do you suspect that those people are not dead? Chapter 150. Sigh. Old fart, it's easy if you're anxious, but I'm afraid you're not. Yu Qianshou looked at the hand on his shoulder and told him seriously, Elder Yan, you're hurting me. Ah. Yan Tuo reacted and immediately let go of his hand. He squeezed out an ugly smile and said, Tell me your suspicions. Yes. Since Elder Yan has asked, I will naturally tell you the truth. Yu Qianshou lowered his head and pondered for a while. He then raised his head and said, Elder Yen, you might not know, but Ghost General has a concubine named Yuji. My suspicions are related to her. At that time, when I begged the Ghost General to let those disciples go, I ended up angering the Ghost General and he chased me out. Before I came out, I seem to have heard that Yuji begging the Ghost General not to kill those people. Yen Tuo's eyes widened. Didn't you say that you saw Ghost General kill those disciples with your own eyes? Who said that? I've never said that I saw the Ghost General kill them with my own eyes. I don't dare to say things that I don't have proof. You must know that when Ghost General broke camp, I didn't even see the bodies of those disciples. All the disciples who were there saw it. Yu Qianqiu looked very innocent. Yen Tuo swallowed hard and said with an agitated expression, "Then do you remember what Yuji said at that time?" Elder Yen, don't rush me. It's been so long. Let me think about it. Yu Qianqiu frowned. Yen Tuo quickly nodded and said, "Think about it. Think about it slowly. I won't rush you once you've thought it through." Yu Qianqiu made a few gestures as if he was thinking about it carefully. Yen Tuo waited at the side with a bitter smile, which almost made the former want to laugh. After a long time, he slowly nodded and said, "General, I think Yuji's original words were like this: General, I've seen those servants who serve me in Chilly Wind Valley for thousands of years and I'm really tired of them. Why don't you let them go and send them to Chilly Wind Valley to be servants? What do you think?" Yu Qianqiu imitated Yuji's speech vividly and came back to his senses. He said seriously, "If I remember correctly, that should be what she said. Then do you remember if Ghost General promised her or not?" Yen Tuo asked excitedly. Yu Qianqiu frowned and said thoughtfully, "Because I had already walked out of the tent at that time, I seemed to vaguely hear Ghost General say, 'Very good' or something. But after thinking about it, I think I must have heard it wrong. Otherwise, after Ghost General let them go, how could we not even see their shadows? Alas. Elder Yen, just pretend that I didn't say what I said today. I'm just guessing about what happened that day. Let's take everyone's conclusion as the truth. I still have something to do and will leave first." Yen Tuo stood there in a daze. After a long time, he came back to his senses and found that Yu Qianqiu had already disappeared. He opened his mouth and froze in place. 2 days later, on the square in front of the main hall of Penglai Pavilion, a big wooden sign announced the list of the competition, which attracted many people to watch. There were nearly 300 disciples participating in the nascent soul stage competition and nearly 1,000 disciples participating in the core formation stage competition. Almost all of them were disciples of the cultivation pavilion. However, there was one exception. At the bottom was written, Alchemy Pavilion, Early Stage Core Formation, Yu Qianqiu. Set off by the more than 1,000 pavilion of cultivation disciples, it was exceptionally prominent. Perhaps someone was deliberately making fun of it, but the words at the very bottom were twice as large as the ones at the top. It was impossible for it not to stand out. This news immediately caused an uproar on Fuxian Island. First, no one expected the famous Yu Qianqiu to reach the core formation stage so quickly. Second, no one expected something that had not been seen for thousands of years to happen. There were actually disciples from other sects who wanted to compete with the cultivation pavilion. It was really exciting. In comparison, no one paid attention to how his cultivation level increased so quickly. Everyone was guessing how many rounds Yu Qianqiu could last. Due to the celebrity effect, the Alchemy Pavilion suddenly became the focal point of Fuxian Island. As long as someone met a disciple of the Alchemy Pavilion, they would stop them and ask them about Yu Qianqiu. The questions they asked were very strange. In short, most people felt that Yu Qianqiu was looking for a thrill. Yu Qianqiu's courtyard was also constantly visited by guests. The first to visit was Furong. After the two of them parted ways, Gu Qingyun came again. The moment he saw Yu Qianqiu, he asked in amazement, "Tisk tsk. Your actions are no different from challenging the cultivation pavilion. There are many core formation disciples in our cultivation pavilion who want to meet you in the first battle. They want to defeat you and make a name for themselves. By the way, when did you reach the core formation stage?" How come I didn't know? It seems it is good to have a principal elder of the alchemy pavilion as a master. Elder Guan must have given you a lot of elixirs, right? Otherwise, how could your cultivation level increase so quickly? Do you have anything good for me? Yu Qianqiu directly coaxed this meddlesome woman who asked a lot of questions to leave. Not long after, Chen Gingxing heard the news and came again. After praising his courage, he shook his head and left with a sigh. Following that, Yang Qian also came. He said helplessly, "You really dared to do it." He walked around him a few times and also left. Soon after, Ko Shuahua and the other two women, as well as Xiao Wanqing from the safe pavilion, also came together. The four women were very confident in him. Xiao Wanqing even encouraged him and declared, "Tomorrow, the four of us will watch your battle together." Yu Qianqiu thanked the four women and saw them off. Just as he was about to take a breath, his master came again. Guan Weiwu stared at him from head to toe countless times and finally sighed, "Disciple, if possible, try to hold on for a few more matches. You have to know that if you lose the first match, it will not look good for our alchemy pavilion." I didn't think you would really be so impulsive. After he finished speaking, he scratched his dirty hair and left in confusion. He originally thought that those who should come were all here and that it should be about time. Who knew that there would be more people coming, and each of them was higher than the last. First, there was a person who surprised him. Yan Tua actually came personally and encouraged him before leaving. Then, the head elder of Wanfen Garden, Fernan, also came. Elder Fernan was like a father-in-law looking at his son-in-law. He nodded with gratification and said, "Since you have signed up, don't think too much. When the time comes, go all out." So what if it is the cultivation pavilion? We are all at core formation stage. Why should we be afraid of them? Yu Qianqiu repeatedly said yes and sent him out. The person who came next shocked Yu Qianqiu. It was actually his master's father, the current Guan Dinghai, the previous head of Fuxian Island. Guan Dinghai stared at him deeply and asked, "Did you decide this yourself or your master? Or did someone else make you do this?" After Yu Qianqiu repeatedly stressed that it was his decision, Guan Dinghai nodded non-committally and left. It was hard to tell if he was happy or unhappy. Yu Qianqiu heaved a sigh of relief. He thought about everyone and thought, Ma Jiugu will be next. Unfortunately, he guessed correctly. Ma Jiugu really came with Lan Bingxue. Ma Jiugu revealed a rare smile and said, "I was right about you. A man shouldn't be so timid." Sigh. It's so good to be young. Before leaving, she added, "There is something you don't know. Not long after you left the mulberry garden, that girl Yan Zixia went back. As for where she went, I think you should know, right?" With that said, she trembled and walked away. Lan Bingxue looked at him with a complicated gaze. Not far from the courtyard, there were two nascent soul disciples chatting. When they saw the people coming and going, they couldn't help but notice them. When they saw that the people coming were all of higher ranks than the other, they were speechless. They looked at each other and quickly left. They were afraid that they would see something the higher-ups didn't want them to see. Yu Qianqiu stood at the entrance of the courtyard and took a deep breath. He really didn't think that participating in a competition would cause such a big commotion. After confirming that no one else would come, he decided to take a good rest. No matter what, he had to rest for tomorrow's competition. In fact, he was worried that the sect head would also come. Chapter 151. The competition was held in the large square in front of the main hall of the cultivation pavilion. There were people everywhere on the ground, on the trees, on the roofs. Sect head Feng Xiangtian and the other elders stood on the top floor of the cultivation pavilion. They looked around and were secretly shocked. Why did so many disciples come to watch? There had been no lack of similar competitions in the past, but it was definitely not as influential as this one. It actually completely surrounded the surroundings. What they didn't know was that other than the disciples from the cultivation pavilion, almost all the disciples from the other factions who had nothing to do had come. Those who had something to do had already finished what they were doing. All of them wanted to see Yu Qianqiu from the alchemy pavilion. It wasn't because Yu Qianqiu had a lot of influence on them, but because Yu Qianqiu's actions were what the other factions wanted to do but didn't dare to do. It was their dream. They were hoping that Yu Qianqiu would be able to break the undefeated legend of the cultivation pavilion on supporting Immortal Island and help them, who were inferior to him, vent their anger. That was all. Many disciples from the other factions who hadn't reached Foundation establishment sighed. They were depressed that they couldn't come out and watch the competition. Around the square, the disciples from the other factions stood together with the people from the cultivation pavilion. The alchemy pavilion had already become the focus of the audience. Even before it appeared, its limelight had already overshadowed the pavilion of cultivation. Who knew how many people were pointing and whispering? The pavilion of cultivation, on the other hand, had become a foil. This made the disciples of the pavilion of cultivation very unhappy. This time, the alchemy pavilion came out in full force. Other than a few disciples who hadn't reached Foundation establishment, everyone else came to support Yu Qianqiu. Even Guan Weiwu stood on the platform of the cultivation pavilion. A few elders walked out of the cultivation pavilion's main hall, led by Dongfang Changgao. Behind them, a few disciples carried out a few large boxes and lined them up in front of the cultivation pavilion's main hall. The elders each walked in front of a large box. Dongfang Chang's voice echoed throughout the square. There are a total of 987 disciples participating in the core formation competition. For fairness, we have decided to draw lots. There are 2 sets of wooden lots numbered from 1 to 493 in these 4 boxes. Those who draw the same number will compete against each other. Because there is only one person, there is a white lot in each box. The disciple who draws the white lot will advance to the second round of the competition. Now, all participating disciples, come and draw lots. Yang Qian turned around to look at Yu Qian, who was beside him, and said with a bitter smile, "The 987th place will be decided by drawing lots. You'll have to win at least 7 matches in a row to get into the top 10. You'd better be prepared." Yu Qianqiu smiled indifferently and walked towards the lottery box in the main hall. The moment he walked out, he attracted the attention of tens of thousands of disciples. Almost everyone's head turned towards the direction of the alchemy pavilion. Feng Xiangtian and the others, who were standing on top of the cultivation pavilion, could clearly see the changes in their surroundings. The white faces on both sides of their heads turned to the back of their heads. It was a spectacular sight. Many elders laughed. Elder Mo of the alchemy pavilion said eccentrically, "Old Guan, this disciple of yours is interesting." Guan Weiwu turned his head and stared at him. "What? You're not convinced? If you have the ability, your alchemy pavilion can also pull out a disciple like this." Elder Mo chuckled. "I know myself. Since I know it will be embarrassing to pull him out, it's better if I don't pull him out. The 2 of you are bickering. Can't you see that there are tens of thousands of disciples below?" Sect Master Feng Xiangtian snorted coldly without turning his head back. The 2 principal elders immediately stared at each other without saying a word. Actually, Yu Qianqiu still wanted to keep a low profile. However, all the other disciples had come out from the cultivation pavilion. He was the only one who walked out from the alchemy pavilion. It was impossible for him not to attract attention. Yu Qianqiu looked around. There were bright eyes staring at him everywhere. It was as if he had become a rare animal in the zoo. "Damn it. Look, look. I won't collect money." Yu Qianqiu muttered to himself as he slowly walked over. There were nearly 1,000 people waiting to draw lots anyway. There was no hurry. Needless to say, his calm and unhurried demeanor made many people admire him. There were many people, so the people who had drawn lots consciously stood on both sides. Seeing that the lots were almost drawn, Yu Qianqiu found a box with fewer people and stood in line. He slowly approached the box. When it was his turn, he realized that the elder who was holding the box with one hand had used his divine sense to protect the box. Obviously, he was afraid that someone would insert their divine sense into the box to cheat. Yu Qianqiu didn't think about cheating. To him, it was the same no matter who he fought. He reached into the box and found that it was almost empty. His fingers touched one and he grabbed it. After taking it out, he didn't look at it and stood to the side obediently. However, he found that the surrounding disciples were looking at him as if they were demons looking at Tang Seng's flesh. Not long after, the lots were drawn. Dongfang Cheng Ao glanced at the crowd and said in a deep voice, "Those who have drawn the white lot, hand over your white lot and wait for the next round of drawing lots." Everyone looked at the lot in their hands and then looked at each other. Yu Qianqiu didn't know the people around him, so he stood there obediently. He didn't believe that his luck was so good that he could draw the white lot from nearly 1,000 people. After a while, no one stood out among the disciples. Everyone looked at each other and didn't understand what was going on. Feng Xiangtian's face instantly darkened. He stared at Dongfang Cheng Ao and shouted, "Cheng Ao, what's going on?" Dongfang Cheng Ao bowed to the people upstairs, then turned around and said sternly, "Look at the lots in your hands again. Look carefully." Yu Qianqiu suddenly felt a little bad. Was his luck really so good? How did he get a free lot just like that? He opened the lot in his hand and looked at it from the front to the back. Suddenly, a layer of sweat appeared on his forehead. Both sides of this thin piece of wood were smooth. It was difficult to find even the slightest flaw, let alone find the words. It was a good thing to draw the white lot, but it was a little hot in his hand. Wasn't it asking for his life? The joke was a little too much. Did everyone look at the lot in your hand clearly? The disciples who drew the white lot stand out. Dongfang Cheng Ao was very depressed. Such a small thing actually caused the sect leader to scold him in front of everyone. "Elder Dongfang, is the lot without words called the white lot?" Someone in the crowd raised a hand and asked weakly. Dongfang Cheng Ao said snappily, "Yes." Yu Qianqiu quickly flashed out of the crowd and ran to Dongfang Cheng Ao with a white lot in his hand. He handed it over with both hands and said in fear and trepidation, "This disciple really didn't know that the lot without words was a white lot. Elder, please punish me." Everyone almost fainted. The surroundings suddenly became lively and there was endless laughter. Dongfang Cheng Ao's face was so gloomy that water could be wrung out. Feng Xiangtian, who was upstairs, saw that the disciple was actually Yu Qianqiu. His mouth opened but he didn't say anything. Guan Weiwu and Ferdinand were dumbfounded. Elder Mo of the equipment refining pavilion lowered his head and hit his head on the railing. He laughed so hard that he couldn't stand straight. After a while, he gasped and said, "Old Guan, this disciple of yours is too good at torturing people. When has Dongfang Cheng Ao been played like this before? Being in the limelight like this will kill people, Chapter 152. Dongfang Cheng Ao naturally knew who Yu Qianqiu was. He turned around and looked at the sect leader. Feng Xiangtian shouted, "Yu Qianqiu, do you know where you are? Is this a place where you can mess around? Since you didn't know anything, I'll forgive you for now. If you do it again, I won't let you off lightly." Yu Qianqiu bowed in gratitude. "Cheng Ao, let's continue." Dongfang Cheng Ao nodded and turned around to look at Yu Qianqiu. He looked around and shouted, "Alchemy Pavilions, Yu Qianqiu has drawn the white lot and will advance to the next round of the competition unconditionally. Those who have drawn lots 1 to 10, stay here. The rest of the disciples can leave for now." Hearing this, Yu Qianqiu let out a sigh of relief. As if he had been granted amnesty, he jogged back to the alchemy pavilion. Seeing him like this, many people laughed to death. Among the cultivation pavilion's crowd, Gu Qingyun shook his head helplessly, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Xiao Wanqing, who was mixed in the crowd of Wanfen Garden, fell powerlessly on Ko Shuahua's shoulder. She couldn't stop giggling. The other girls also couldn't help but smile. Unfortunately, Furong didn't like crowded places and didn't come this time. Otherwise, who knew what she would think if she saw this? "You, sigh. I really don't know what to say to you. Yang Qian smiled bitterly as he looked at Yu Qianzhou, who had run back to his side. Yu Qianzhou cupped his hands at the alchemy pavilion disciples and said, I really didn't do it on purpose. I've made a fool of myself in front of everyone. I'm really sorry. Everyone revealed a smile of support. After the spectators laughed, they were greatly disappointed. They had come here mainly for Yu Qianzhou. Who would have thought that he would run into him when there was a 1 in 1,000 chance? Who could they go to talk to about this? The plaza was large enough, and it was divided into 10 areas, each supervised by 10 elders. This time, the competition between the 10 pairs of disciples began. The joke just now was also temporarily thrown aside by the crowd, and their attention shifted to the competition. The sword transformed into a stream of light, crisscrossing in all directions. Silhouettes flashed and shouted. For a moment, the entire square was filled with the sound of metal clashing, and there were even sounds of collisions. After the competition, most of the 10 disciples who lost were injured. Some were even carried away with serious injuries. Those who were on good terms with Yu Qianzhou couldn't help but worry for him. Death and injury were allowed in this competition. Naturally, the goal was to allow the participants to display their full strength. Looking at the competition just now, many people had shown mercy. Perhaps it was because they were disciples of the same faction, so it was not good for them to kill. Otherwise, they would not be able to explain themselves when they returned. But for Yu Qianzhou, it would not be so good. Most of the disciples who signed up for the competition were late core formation stage disciples. At the same time, they were also the elites of the cultivation pavilion. Think about it, if there was a large difference in cultivation, they would have already suffered a great loss. Although they were all core formation cultivators, Yu Qianzhou's cultivation was 2 whole layers lower than theirs. If his opponent didn't show mercy, then Yu Qianzhou's situation would be obvious. Yu Qianzhou had also discovered that the closer the cultivation of the 2 disciples, the more dangerous the battle would be. Everyone wanted to win and would often attack with the intention of killing the other. As a result, once the victor was decided, one side would either die or be seriously injured. It was not like when there was a large difference in cultivation. Those with higher cultivation could easily win, so they could control their strength. If the competition continued like this, then a few people would definitely die. Sure enough, in the second round, a disciple's head was cut off by his opponent. The smell of blood spread and seemed to have stimulated the competing disciples. The fighting became more and more intense and both sides often attacked each other to kill. Yang Qian looked worriedly at Yu Qianzhou. He saw that Yu Qianzhou's eyes were slightly narrowed. Feng Xiangtian, who was in the cultivation pavilion, frowned. Guan Weiwu called him over and said, Weiwu, although Yu Qianzhou's cultivation was forcibly raised to the core formation stage by you, there is still a gap between him and the other disciples. His talent in alchemy is really rare. If something happens to him, it will be a great loss to supporting Immortal Island. What I mean is, should you let him think about it? If it really doesn't work, let him go up and admit defeat. Didn't he draw a blank this round? It's not too late to let him withdraw from the competition now. The elders on the side thought about it and felt that sect leader was right. Yu Qianzhou's alchemy was a secret to others, but most of the people upstairs had seen Yu Qianzhou's alchemy with their own eyes. His talent was really great. If anything happened to him, it would be a great loss for supporting Immortal Island. They couldn't help but nod in agreement with sect leader's opinion. Guan Weiwu was taken aback. Senior brother, wouldn't my alchemy pavilion lose face? Sect leader, I don't think it's necessary. Ferdinand walked over and said with a frown, what's the use of refining elixirs no matter how good he is? If he runs away from a competition with his fellow disciples, I'm afraid he won't be able to raise his head in supporting Immortal Island for the rest of his life. Unless he leaves supporting Immortal Island in the future. In Ferdinand's mind, he didn't want his daughter to follow a waste. Yes. Yes. Guan Weiwu echoed. Feng Xiangtian nodded slightly and turned his attention back to the competition. The elders didn't say anything. Nearly 1,000 people fought nearly 50 matches. A day passed just like that. In the end, most of the people who lost were injured. More than 10 disciples even lost their lives. Yu Qianzhou sat cross-legged on the ground and watched the competition from beginning to end without saying a word. Every time he saw those who killed their opponents, his eyes would unconsciously narrow and remember that person's face. There was no competition that night because it was held during the day. After the competition ended, the disciples of each faction quickly rushed back. If there was anything, they had to quickly finish it tonight. Yu Qianzhou couldn't run away from tomorrow's competition. Because there were 493 disciples who won today and Yu Qianzhou who had advanced in advance, it was just an even number and could be divided into 247 matches. So, it meant that there wouldn't be a situation where there would be a blank lot tomorrow. Tomorrow was really a good day that everyone was looking forward to. The next day, the crowd didn't decrease at all. Their gazes were still focused on Yu Qianzhou who was drawing the lot. Yu Qianzhou touched the lot and held it firmly in his palm after taking a glance. A smile appeared on his lips. His luck wasn't bad. It was a round number. The number was 20. However, he didn't know who his opponent was. When he returned to the elixir refinery pavilion, Yang Qian asked even though he already knew the answer, "Are you done?" Yu Qianzhou nodded. Seeing the worry in his eyes, he couldn't help but smile. Was there really so much to worry about? When he had been cultivating in Utopia, he had often gotten the 3 company commanders in the late-stage nascent soul realm to spar with him. That was not child's play. He was playing with real skills. Why would he be afraid of these disciples in the late-stage core formation realm? Yu Qianzhou calmly watched the competition in front of him. When he realized that his disciple, who had already killed someone yesterday, had actually killed another opponent today, Yu Qianzhou's eyes narrowed into slits, and a cold gleam flashed in them. The surrounding people watched the matches one after another, but they still didn't see Yu Qianzhou go up. They were all a little anxious, but they didn't know what number he had drawn. When Dongfang Chang'ao announced the start of the 20th match of the day, Yu Qianzhou stood up and slowly walked towards the center of the stage. Yang Qian, who was standing to the side, let out a soft, sound. Immediately, like a stone being tossed into 1,000 ripples, everyone's heads turned around, their gazes all focused on the figure that was slowly walking towards the center of the stage. Chapter 153. The whole place was in an uproar. People were pointing at Yu Qianzhou, who was walking out. The sect leader and others in the attic were a little surprised. Looking at the disciples, they did not expect Yu Qianzhou to have such a great influence. Gu Qingyun was a little excited. Ever since the trial in the demon ghost region, Yu Qianzhou seemed to have become a legend that wasn't a legend. Although the two of them were on good terms, Yu Qianzhou still suppressed Gu Qingyun to the point that he couldn't breathe. Ko Shuihua and the other girls were also a little excited. So far, those who knew Yu Qianzhou in Fuxian Island had not seen him fight seriously. Their anticipation could be imagined. The 20 disciples gave the lots to Dongfang Chang'ao. The attention of these disciples was also focused on Yu Qianzhou. Their eyes were fixed on the lot in his hand. It seemed that they were all looking forward to fighting with him. The 10 elders reported the number they needed to supervise, and the disciples followed them to the competition ground. When there was only Yu Qianzhou and another person left in front of the hall, the two of them turned their heads and looked at each other. Needless to say, you and I are opponents. The person who supervised the competition was Elder's son, who went to the demon ghost region last time. He glanced at the two of them and said loudly, "The one who drew number 200, follow me." After that, he walked to the last competition ground, and the two of them followed him. I say, this guy should work hard. Guan Weiwu rubbed his palms excitedly and anxiously. There were traces of water on the railing that he had just grabbed. Obviously, his palms were sweaty. Ferdinand, who was standing on the side, glanced at him and said with a smile, "Don't worry. I have paid attention to his opponent. He is not the kind of person who is cruel and merciless. Even if he can't win, it should not be a big deal." Because Yu Qianqiu often went to Wanfen Garden, many disciples of Wanfen Garden knew him. At this time, seeing him standing in the competition ground, they all talked about whether he could win or not. Xiao Wanqing and the other girls turned around and told them with certainty, Yu Qianqiu will definitely be able to do it. The girls' blind worship didn't diminish at all. Ko Shuahua, on the other hand, was much more rational. After hearing their words, she shook her head slightly. Begin. Dongfang Chang Ao's voice rang out. The onlookers immediately fell silent. The sounds of fighting immediately rang out. However, this was not what everyone was concerned about. Everyone's attention was on the two people on the 10th stage. However, the two people in the field did not make a move for a long time. The two of them sized each other up for a while and suddenly laughed, causing the surrounding people to feel a little puzzled. Yu Qianqiu's opponent cupped his fists and said with a smile, I'm Lu Guang, a late-stage core formation cultivator. You must be the legendary Yu Qianqiu who roamed the demon and ghost domain. I've heard so much about you. I didn't think that I would be the first to fight against you. It's an honor. So it's Senior Marshal Brother Lu. I've seen Senior Marshal Brother fight yesterday. I hope Senior Marshal Brother will go easy on me like yesterday. Yu Qianqiu smiled and returned the greeting. He had an impression of this person. He was the only person who didn't injure his opponent in the slightest yesterday. Other than showing that he had a good heart, it could also be seen that his cultivation level was also not bad from the way he attacked. Are the two of you here to chat or to fight? Elder Son, who was in charge of supervising the competition, was a little unhappy. The two of them first stood there for a while, then looked at each other, smiled, and chatted for a while. There were already a few battles in the other fields that had been decided, but the two of them still hadn't made a move. Please. Lu Guang gestured for his opponent to make the first move. In his mind, there was a gap of 2 levels between their cultivation levels. This was a battle without any suspense. Even if he won, it would be a little unfair. Yu Qianqiu smiled and nodded. His entire aura suddenly changed. Although there was still a smile on his face, it was as if the person standing there wasn't a human, but an immovable mountain, indifferently looking down at the opponent in front of him. Lu Guang suddenly felt suffocated by the aura. He was shocked and the long sword on his back shot out with a clang. He circled around his body and carefully guarded himself. Elder Son's pupils also suddenly widened as he stared at Yu Qianqiu in surprise. The disciples who were watching the competition also noticed the strangeness here. Feng Xiangtian, who was on the pavilion, suddenly had a flash of light in his eyes. He stared at this place and slowly stroked his long beard. The group of elders also slightly squinted their eyes. At this moment, the other battles had already ended, but they still hadn't made a move. Senior Brother Lu, be careful. The move I'm going to use is called, One Sword of No Regrets. Please give me some pointers, Senior Brother Lu. Yu Qianqiu said indifferently, giving Lu Guang a great deal of pressure. He also didn't know why it was like this. His opponent's cultivation was obviously 2 levels lower than his, but he didn't know what he was afraid of. All of a sudden, everyone who was staring at the square seemed to see a flash of light. Before they could figure out what was going on, they saw a bright flying sword pointed straight at Lu Guang's throat. While everyone was silent and shocked, they heard the ing-ing sound that could only be heard when a long sword was quickly unsheathed spread throughout the square. Everyone then reacted and was shocked. What a fast speed! The sword was already on his opponent's neck, and they only heard the sound of the sword being unsheathed. Oh my God! How fast was this speed? It was too terrifying. Without a doubt, it had already surpassed the speed of sound transmission. Elder Son was the closest person to the two competitors. With his cultivation, he could clearly see the sword's trajectory, but the speed of the sword was too shocking. Sect Master Feng Xiangtian's hand that was stroking his beard paused, and the group of elders were all stunned. Guan Weiwu's mouth was wide open, and his face was full of disbelief. Feeling the sharpness on his neck, Lu Guang smiled bitterly with a pale face. I've lost. The long sword that was circling around his body slowly returned to its scabbard. Was there still a need to compete? Lu Guang had already shown mercy, or else his head would have been separated from his neck. But this speed was too fast, so fast that he didn't even have the chance to react. Yu Qianqiu withdrew his aura, and his long sword flashed back into its scabbard. He turned to leave. Lu Guang suddenly shouted, "Junior brother Yu, please wait." "What's the matter, senior brother Lu?" Yu Qianqiu turned around and asked. "Junior brother Xiaoyu, please show mercy." Lu Guang dejectedly bowed and asked for guidance. "Just now, I heard junior brother Yu say that this move is called, one sword without regrets. I felt that it was strange. I've never seen this sword technique in the Sutra Pavilion before. Junior brother Yu, please teach me so that I can understand why I lost." Yu Qianqiu calmly smiled and said, "This sword technique was created when I was reading the Sutra Pavilion's sword techniques. Senior brother Lu, there's no need to thank me. If you want to thank someone, thank yourself. If it wasn't for senior brother Lu having the heart of a Buddha at the center of the competition yesterday, my sword should have no regrets. But in the end, I still regretted it and didn't dare to hurt senior brother Lu." Finished speaking, he turned around and walked towards the people from the alchemy pavilion. Lu Guang was so scared that he broke out in a cold sweat. It seemed that Lu Guang let him go because he didn't hurt anyone yesterday. Otherwise, that sword really would have taken his life. Thinking about it, he felt lucky for his momentary kindness yesterday. At this moment, the people from the cultivation pavilion were silent. The core formation stage disciples were all thinking about whether they could have dodged that sword if they were in Lu Guang's shoes. The other factions were boiling with excitement, as if they had won. Yu Qianqiu's sword had won beautifully. With just one sword, he had defeated the cultivation pavilion's disciple. Finally, they, the inferior disciples who did odd jobs, could vent their anger. Chapter 154. The outcome of the battle was naturally too surprising for everyone. Guan Weiwu scratched his head and laughed. "Not bad, you brat. You didn't waste my effort." Ferdinand's face twitched. He turned his head and sneered, "How dare you say that? What effort did you waste? What did you teach this disciple?" Guan Weiwu rolled his eyes and snorted, "This is between us, master and disciple. Why should I tell you?" Ferdinand sneered disdainfully and turned his head to ignore Guan Weiwu. Feng Xiangtian asked the person next to him, "What sword skill in the Sutra Depository is good at speed? Why haven't I heard of it? Is this boy really so talented that he can actually comprehend some sword skill?" With their cultivation, they naturally heard the conversation between Yu Qianqiu and Lu Guang. The person next to him had white hair and beard, a calm temperament, and a dignified aura. It was the cultivation pavilion's principal elder, O Sihai. He said calmly, "I have never seen any sword skill in the Sutra Depository that is good at speed. Even if he really comprehended it, so what? Speed? Humph. It's just an unorthodox skill. It's vulnerable in the face of absolute strength." The disciple who was defeated just now was just careless. Feng Xiangtian raised his eyebrows and did not say anything. He looked at the competition venue again. This round had only finished 20 matches. There were still nearly 5 matches left. The next matches had already begun. Most people were still immersed in Yu Qianqiu's match just now. They were obviously a little absent-minded in the following matches. The disciples of the alchemy pavilion were even less in the mood to watch. When they saw Yu Qianqiu walking back, they were all in high spirits and happily accepted the envious eyes of the other disciples. After he sat down cross-legged, Yang Qian smiled and said, "What else do you have that we don't know? It turns out that you already have a card up your sleeve. We were worried for nothing." Yu Qianqiu smiled and said, "I was just lucky. My opponent's cultivation is higher than mine. My speed can only be used when he is unprepared. Now that I'm exposed, I'm afraid the next match won't be so easy." Yang Qian thought for a while and nodded slightly. "I told you that Yu Qianqiu would be able to do it. Do you see now? I was right." Xiao Wanqing and the others were chatting with a group of female disciples in the myriad fragrance garden. Ko Shuahua shook her head. With Yu Qianqiu like this, the girls were afraid. The matches were over very quickly. Another dozen people lost their lives. Yu Qianqiu watched each match seriously and found that the ones who killed their fellow disciples were always the same dozen people. They never showed mercy when they attacked. They were all ruthless characters. The second round of matches ended and 247 people were decided. The third round of drawing lots began. This time, there was also a white lot. Yu Qianqiu had learned his lesson and immediately looked at the lot he drew. It was number 36, which was the third match of the third round. It seemed that good luck would not always be on his side. This kind of fight between cultivators would not last too long. Usually, the winner would be decided in less than 10 minutes. Because the arena was divided, the range of movement was restricted. Those who were strong had to win as soon as possible so that they would not be given too much time. Otherwise, how long would it take to fight nearly 1,000 matches from start to finish? Of course, the disciples who were good at fighting were at a disadvantage, but it was a test of their overall strength. After the 2 matches were over, Dongfang Chang Ao announced the preparation for the third match. Yu Qianqiu immediately stood up and handed in the wooden lot. When he arrived at arena number 6, he saw that his opponent was one of the dozen people who were easy to kill. After 2 matches, he had killed 2 people in a row. Yu Qianqiu could not help but squint his eyes. Many people also noticed the situation, and many of them were worried for Yu Qianqiu. As soon as Dongfang Chang Ao announced the start of the match, Yu Qianqiu wanted to bow and ask for his opponent's name. Just as he cupped his fists, his opponent's long sword quickly shot out and slashed at his head. There was no room for negotiation. Yu Qianqiu was taken aback. Fortunately, his flying speed was extremely fast. In an instant, a sword light flashed behind him and directly blocked the flying sword. The flying sword was originally connected to the mind. Yu Qianqiu's cultivation was 2 levels lower than his opponent's. In addition, it happened suddenly and his mind was unstable. How could he resist the opponent's premeditated attack? He only felt that the heavy blow from the sword shook his mind. His chest was stuffy, his throat was sweet, and he immediately spat out a mouthful of blood. The sudden change surprised everyone. They did not expect that the Cultivation Pavilion's disciple, who was 2 levels higher than his opponent, would still use a sneak attack. Guan Weiwu, who was on the attic, saw this and was about to fly out to save his disciple, but he was grabbed by Ferdinand who was next to him. Yu Qianqiu was in a trance. His mind had already lost contact with the flying sword, and the flying sword fell to the ground with a clang. The man smiled sinisterly. After shaking off the opponent's sword, he flipped the sword in the air and shot it straight at Yu Qianqiu. At the moment when the connection between the sword and the mind was broken, Yu Qianqiu suddenly woke up. He suddenly felt something was wrong, and his figure quickly dodged. He saw a stream of light rushing into the place where he was just standing. There was a loud bang on the bluestone floor. Stone chips flew everywhere, and a hole was directly blasted on the ground. Yu Qianqiu's figure dodged and stabilized his mind. When his divine sense had just reconnected with the flying sword on the ground, he saw the opponent's figure flashed and stepped on the flying sword on the ground. Yu Qianqiu immediately felt that the connection between his mind and the flying sword was broken again. A cold light flashed again from the hole in the ground and whistled straight over. Yu Qianqiu flipped backwards, and the cold light brushed past his body. However, before he could stabilize his body, he heard a whistling sound behind him. He immediately rolled to the side, and another hole exploded on the ground. The spectators were shocked to the core. Since the start of the competition, this was the first time they had seen someone knock away a flying sword in a single exchange. Thinking about it, it must have something to do with the difference in cultivation between Yu Qianqiu and his opponent. Xiao Wanqing and the other girls were also frightened by the scene in front of them. The scene of Yu Qianqiu controlling 3 swords at the same time in the demon ghost region flashed through Ko Shuahua's mind. Her gaze fell on the flying sword that was stepped on, and her tightly furrowed eyebrows relaxed. She didn't know why, but after the attacking flying sword came out from the ground, it floated in the air and didn't attack again. The cultivation pavilion's disciple revealed an expression of a cat playing with a mouse. He jokingly said, "You are that Yu Qianqiu, right? You're only at the early stage of core formation, yet you dare to come here to join in the fun. You really don't know what's good for you. If you kneel down and admit defeat now, I can consider sparing your life. Otherwise, you can wait for the alchemy pavilion to collect your corpse." With that said, the flying sword threateningly pointed at Yu Qianqiu in the air and circled twice. Guan Weiwu, who was on the pavilion, was so angry that he couldn't speak. He rolled up his sleeves and looked like he was going to fight desperately, but he was hugged tightly by Fernan. Yu Qianqiu stood up and spat out a mouthful of bloody saliva. Then, he suddenly burst into wild laughter. Contrasting with the bloodstains on his face and clothes, he looked somewhat ferocious as he roared, "Bullshit. I was considering whether or not to give the cultivation pavilion some face. Now that the emperor is here, don't expect me to let you go. You arrogant dog." His voice spread out in all directions. Everyone heard what he said clearly, and they were all stunned. None of them expected Yu Qianqiu to curse in front of so many people. It was truly a disgrace to him. The cultivation pavilion's disciple was stunned. He shouted with a livid face, "You're courting death. Courting your mother." Yu Qianqiu immediately shouted back. He made a hand sign and dozens of cold lights flashed out of his storage bag. One of the cold lights turned into a sword and carried him into the air. The other 50 cold lights turned into a sword umbrella and protected his back. Under the bright sun in the sky, the sword umbrella emitted a dazzling golden light. The people around almost couldn't see Yu Qianqiu clearly in the sword circle in the air. Chapter 155. What was going on? The people watching were all dumbfounded. They saw Yu Qianqiu floating majestically in the air like a god, and behind him was a shining golden wheel. Some disciples were positioned at the angle of refraction of the sunlight, and they couldn't open their eyes because of the dazzling light. Feng Xiangtian and the elders in the pavilion looked at each other. No one had seen this kind of sword technique before. Guan Weiwu rubbed his palms excitedly. The cultivation pavilion's disciples' expression changed. The flying sword sped up and shot toward Yu Qianqiu in the air. Yu Qianqiu coldly snorted and stretched out 2 fingers to point at the sword umbrella. 3 cold lights suddenly shot out from the sword umbrella behind him, clashing with the incoming flying swords. A series of clanking sounds rang out as the 4 flying swords fought in the air. As for the others, there were still a few disciples who had yet to decide a victor in their battles. They all stopped fighting and looked over at the battle over here. The commotion over here was too big. Yu Qianqiu released 3 flying swords. One of them entangled the opponent's flying sword, and they kept clashing head-on. Although his cultivation level was not as high as the opponent's, he was fast. When one sword was knocked away, the other one would follow up. Of the 3 flying swords, one was always facing off against the opponent's flying sword, while the other 2 would seize the opportunity to strike the opponent's sword with their sharp sword light. It was a bit like the 3 heroes versus Lu Bu. In short, the 3 flying swords trapped the sword, not giving it any chance to escape. This was because his cultivation level was not as high as the opponent's, so he could only win by outnumbering the opponent. In the beginning, Yu Qianqiu was worried that the opponent's cultivation level was too high, and he would be injured if the flying swords collided with it. After calming himself down a few times, he felt relieved. It was not because of the difference in cultivation level between the 2, but because he was not prepared at the beginning and was successfully ambushed. When he was in Utopia, this situation did not happen when he was sparring with the 3 company commanders who were at the late nascent soul stage. It was purely because he was careless. However, this provided a very good way for him to fight in the future. Sneak attacks were definitely a good choice. Now that he had nothing to worry about, it was time to deal with this guy. Yu Qianqiu looked down and cackled, "You dog, see how I'll deal with you." He stretched out 2 fingers and pointed with the driving sword art. The sword umbrella behind him released 2 rays of cold light that flew towards the cultivation pavilion's disciple. After being tricked by him just now, Yu Qianqiu also had thoughts of revenge. The 2 beams of cold light did not kill the opponent very quickly, and the opponent always managed to dodge it. That person was rolling on the ground and jumping around. Just as his figure flashed, the flying sword pierced a hole in the ground. As for the sword that he stepped on just now, Yu Qianqiu kept it for his own use. Bang, bang, bang. The sound of explosions rang out one after another. There was not a single piece of limestone laid on the 6th stage that was left intact. There were potholes everywhere. That person was immediately forced into a difficult situation by the 3 flying swords. His initial arrogance and complacency had long since disappeared. Right now, he was desperately running for his life. In the eyes of the bystanders, he was even more frightened and in a precarious situation. He didn't know when he would be slaughtered. His appearance was indeed a bit shameful. Dog, if you kneel down and admit defeat now, I can consider sparing your life. Otherwise, just wait for the cultivation pavilion to collect your corpse. Kaka. Yu Qianqiu laughed arrogantly. He completely threw that person's words back at him. After a round of torture, that disciple did indeed have thoughts of admitting defeat. However, he couldn't kneel down and admit defeat even if he was beaten to death. If he really did that, he feared that the cultivation pavilion would no longer be able to tolerate him. At this moment, the people with the most complicated feelings were none other than the disciples of the cultivation pavilion. Each and every one of their faces sank. When did a main faction disciple get forced into this state by a subsidiary faction disciple? This was truly a disgrace to the cultivation pavilion. Gu Qingyun's expression was indescribably gloomy. From the standpoint of a friend, he should hope that Yu Qianqiu would win. From the standpoint of reputation, he naturally hoped that the main faction disciple would win. After all, he was a member of the cultivation pavilion, and if he lost face, he would also be implicated. Thinking a little more, Gu Qingyun gnashed his teeth in anger. That fellow was truly hateful. Leaving aside the fact that he sneak attacked, it was fine if he took advantage of Qin Wendian at the start. But why did he have to say such harsh words? Now, Qin Wendian had sent his words back to Gu Qingyun. Gu Qingyun didn't even have a path to retreat. If it was a normal win or loss, then no one would say anything. Just like Lu Guang at the beginning. But things had become like this. The 2 of them bullied and scolded each other, implicating the 2 factions behind them. Right now, it was no longer a matter of 2 people, but a matter of the reputation of the 2 factions. It was a matter of life and death, and no one could take a step back. The majority of the disciples of the cultivation pavilion had the same thoughts as Gu Qingyun. The disciples of the other factions were extremely excited. Yu Qianqiu had really made the subsidiary factions proud. The number 6 arena was still rumbling non-stop. The arena with a radius of tens of meters was already much shorter than the surrounding area. That disciple was also suffering in silence. He was still fleeing in all directions, and his whole body was already covered in sweat. Seeing that he refused to admit defeat, Yu Qianqiu sneered and prepared to kill him. However, from the beginning, he had no intention of letting him go, even though he had already admitted defeat. Bastard, I don't want to play with you anymore. Hand over your life. Yu Qianqiu shouted loudly. He pointed with his finger and the dazzling sword will behind him split into 10 rays of sword light. Xiu xiu. The rays of sword light quickly rushed down. Ah! That disciple suddenly shouted and raised his hand. A golden bracelet on his wrist flashed with a golden light. In an instant, that golden light enveloped his entire body. More than 10 rays of cold light that were shooting at high speed collided with the bracelet, making ding ding dang dang sounds. One after another, they were all knocked away. F***CK. What is this? Yu Qianqiu looked down in a daze. The surrounding people were also in an uproar. Diamond bracelet. Guan Weiwu, who was on the pavilion, was startled at first. Then, he turned his head and said angrily, "Elder O, what is the meaning of this? How can you allow a disciple to bring a magic weapon into the arena? This is too unfair to the other disciples." Osihai glanced at him and said expressionlessly, "Who said that magic weapons can't be brought into the arena? Who allowed your alchemy pavilion disciple to bring so many flying swords into the arena? Isn't this unfair to the other disciples? That's because of the sword technique he cultivates. He can control so many flying swords at the same time, so it doesn't matter if he brings more flying swords." Guan Weiwu defended himself. His own disciple was about to win, but the other side actually brought out a magic weapon. How could he not be angry? That diamond bracelet wasn't given to him by the cultivation pavilion. When he went out to cultivate, he killed a demonic path disciple and obtained it with his own ability. Why can't he use something that belongs to him? Osihai sneered, then suddenly turned his head and said in a deep voice, "Guan Weiwu, who gave you the right to speak to me like this?" Guan Weiwu was stunned. Osihai's cultivation had reached the peak of the middle stage of the tribulation passing stage. He was a bit stronger than the sect leader. According to seniority in the outside world, he was his father's junior brother. He was a generation older than the sect leader and belonged to the same branch of the Guan family. Senior brother. You be the judge. Guan Weiwu didn't dare to show his power and could only look for his senior brother, the sect leader. Feng Xiangtian looked down, paused, and said, "A magic weapon obtained with one's own ability is naturally a part of one's strength. This is fair to everyone. The two of you don't need to argue anymore." Although the last sentence seemed to be reprimanding the two of them, in general, it was obvious that he was on Osihai's side. "Yes, sect leader." Osihai responded with a smile and looked down without saying anything. Guan Weiwu's face twitched, but he also had nothing to say. Chapter 156. After the disciple was enveloped by the golden light barrier, he let out a breath and his expression gradually calmed down. Yu Qianqiu didn't believe it and controlled his flying sword to attack again. After a series of clanging sounds, the thin, transparent barrier didn't react at all. What a powerful magic treasure. The disciples of the various factions felt that it was a pity. Yu Qianqiu was about to win, but his opponent actually came up with such a thing. Xiao Wanqing turned to Ko Shuahua and asked, "Martial Ant Ko, what is that egg-shaped light barrier? It has such a strong defense. I think Yu Qianqiu's flying sword can't do anything to it." Ko Shuahua stared at the location of the competition and frowned. "It's the Vajra bracelet, a top-notch mid-grade defensive magic treasure. The light barrier it emits is called the Vajra barrier. As long as the cultivator using this treasure has enough vitality, even an early-stage tribulation-passing cultivator won't be able to break it. I just don't know how such a magic treasure fell into the hands of a late-stage core formation cultivator." "Ah. A top-notch mid-grade defensive magic treasure?" Xiao Wanqing was stunned. Even in a large sect like the supporting Immortal Island, only nascent soul cultivators could get a low-grade magic treasure. Usually, it was only an offensive magic treasure. A top-notch mid-grade defensive magic treasure could almost be considered a low-grade high-grade magic treasure. It should be known that magic treasures that could protect one's life were very difficult to refine. Not everyone had the opportunity to obtain one. With one in hand, it wouldn't be a problem to protect one's life. After all, in the cultivation world, as long as you weren't too unlucky, you wouldn't always encounter mid-stage tribulation-passing opponents. The disciple in the barrier took out a handful of chi recovery pills and put one in his mouth. He stared at Yu Qianqiu with a gloomy expression. Xiao Wanqing said regretfully, "He still has chi recovery pills. It seems that even Yu Qianqiu can't do anything to him." In each faction, there were seniors like Ko Shuahua who knew what was good for them. Soon, the news that the disciple was using the Vajra bracelet spread. Everyone felt that it was a pity. It seemed that no one could do anything to the other. After Yu Qianqiu struck the light barrier for a while, he lost his temper and couldn't help but curse, "You coward. If you have the guts, then come out and fight me fair and square." What are you hiding in there for? You shameless thing. A grand late core formation disciple is actually scared of an early core formation cultivator like this. If you have the guts, then get the hell out here. How could the true cultivation pavilion produce trash like you? Damn it. Damn it. Aside from sneak attacks, you only know how to hide like a turtle. Today, I've learned the skills of the cultivation pavilion. The disciple looked at Yu Qianzhou with resentment and cursed loudly. He clenched his fists so hard that they made popping sounds. Even if he left the competition alive today, he wouldn't have the face to see anyone after being tormented by Yu Qianzhou like this. After the impulse, he calmed down. However, his expression was frighteningly gloomy. After all, his life was more important. As long as he was alive, he wouldn't have to worry about not having a chance to take revenge. The disciples of the cultivation pavilion who were watching from the sidelines were so angry at Yu Qianzhou that they gnashed their teeth. If he cursed, then so be it. Why did he have to curse the entire cultivation pavilion? Those words were too hurtful. All the elders in the pavilion looked at each other in dismay. They had never seen such a thing happen in all the previous competitions, and they had never seen a disciple like Yu Qianzhou who didn't even have the least bit of pretense, and was like a shrew who threw a tantrum in public. Guan Weiwu and Ferdinand were a little dumbfounded. The former had never seen this side of his disciple. It was really too much. The latter did not expect his future son-in-law to be like this. Although he had seen Yu Qianzhou act shamelessly in the 10,000 fragrance garden, he had never seen such a shameless act in public. Oh, Sihai's face was frighteningly gloomy. As the principal elder of the cultivation pavilion, how could he be happy when he saw someone pointing at the cultivation pavilion's nose and cursing like this, let alone in front of so many people? He turned his head and said in a deep voice, Guan Weiwu, is this your personal disciple? That elder, oh, he might have been muddled by the sneak attack of your disciple. I will definitely scold him when I get back. While Guan Weiwu was apologizing, he heard his disciple on the other side was still cursing without restraint. His vulgarities were increasing, and the more he cursed, the uglier it was. Guan Weiwu smiled apologetically and wiped his forehead. Feng Shangtian also frowned. His lips moved a few times as if he wanted to say something, but in the end, he did not say anything. This competition was originally for the disciples to fight with their lives. To put it bluntly, no matter what method you used to win, it was still a part of your strength. His disciple almost lost his life in the beginning, so a few curses like this was nothing. It was just that it was indeed a little outrageous. The disciples of the various sects had seen it today. A competition could actually be like this? They did not know if Yu Qianzhou had won glory for the auxiliary disciples today or if he had lost face. All of them were speechless as they listened to him cursing in different ways. Gu Qingyun, who was in the cultivation pavilion's crowd, was dumbfounded and did not know whether to laugh or cry. Xiao Wanqing's small red lips froze for a while before she turned to look at the crowd and said embarrassedly, "Is that really Yu Qianzhou?" She really did not expect that the mighty and omnipotent Yu Qianzhou in her heart would actually have this side to him. It completely overturned her image in her heart. Those people that Yu Qianzhou had saved from the demon ghost region were the same. Was this still the same Yu Qianzhou who sang and played the zither in the demon ghost region and chatted cheerfully with the ghost general? Bastard, coward, son of AB*TCH. Yu Qianzhou stood in the air for a long time and cursed for a long time. Seeing that the other party was not moved by his provocation, he finally stopped. He immediately felt his true essence was a little exhausted and his mouth was a little dry. He immediately took out a handful of energy recovery pills and stuffed them all into his mouth like candy. After recovering his true essence, he held his chin and flew around the Vajra barrier a few times. Suddenly, he slapped his forehead as if he had suddenly realized something and reached his hand into his storage bag. This made the disciple below nervous, not knowing what he was going to do. Yu Qianzhou took out a few yellow talismans and laughed sinisterly. How could he have forgotten about the astral breaching talismans made by Chen Feng? He had wasted so much saliva. Whether it was useful or not, he had to try it first. He took out a talisman with 2 fingers and slowly raised it up. It immediately attracted everyone's attention. The disciple immediately felt that something was wrong. He immediately poured a large amount of true essence into the Vajra bracelet. The golden light barrier immediately became golden, clearly strengthening its defensive capabilities. A yellow light shot out from Yu Qianzhou's hand towards the Vajra barrier. With a loud bang, the disciple and the barrier were blasted several times. When he crawled up with a face full of fear, he found that the Vajra barrier was not damaged at all. He could not help but heave a sigh of relief. Damn! How can it be so sturdy? Again. Yu Qianzhou threw the astral breaching talismans one after another, causing a series of loud booms. The spectating disciples were speechless. Fernan, who was in the pavilion, frowned. It seems like the astral breaching talisman that can break nascent soul stages' true chi. Where did this kid get it? Elder Mo, who was a few steps away, shook his head with both hands on the railing. That disciple was vicious in the previous 2 rounds. This time, he has met his nemesis. With his cultivation, I'm afraid that he will not be in a good state even if he does not get injured. Guan Weiwu, who was standing at the side, smiled. He was too embarrassed to continue protecting his disciple. Yu Qianzhou had a total of 6 astral breaching talismans. After using them all at once, he realized that they still could not do anything to him. The defense of the light barrier was too good. The disciple was blasted to the ground 6 times in a row. His face was deathly pale. Fortunately, he wasn't injured. He stared at his opponent in the air as if his eyes were about to burst into flames. He raised his hand and stuffed another energy recovery pill into his mouth. What are you looking at? If you are not convinced, come out if you have the guts. Yu Qianzhou was very annoyed by his gaze. If he did not take the opportunity to kill him this time, he did not know what kind of revenge he would attract in the future. He immediately shouted, "An iron rod can be ground into a needle. I don't believe that I cannot break your tortoise shell." He put his palms together and his 10 fingers turned to form a shadow. It was as bright as a lotus flower. Dozens of cold lights appeared from his storage bag. The flying swords on his back also flashed. Nearly 100 flying swords danced in the air at the same time. It was a spectacular scene. Everyone had never seen a person control so many flying swords at the same time. They all stared at the sky in shock. You're tuning into the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.